The ocean is a thief, and its primary target is heat. Water pulls warmth from a living body 25 times faster than the air above it. An invisible and relentless extraction that never pauses, never tires, and never shows mercy. To be a warm-blooded mammal, existing entirely within the cold crush of the Pacific, is to live in a state of constant thermodynamic debt. Whales and seals solve this problem with mass and insulation, wrapping themselves in thick, heavy layers of blubber that act as a biological firewall against the freezing depths. They build a fortress of fat and retreat inside it. But if you look at the surface, drifting along the coastal swells, you will see a creature that rejected the fortress entirely. It floats on its back, riding the rise and fall of the water with an air of complete, almost arrogant leisure. Its chest is exposed to the sky, its hind flippers casually crossed, rocking gently in the cradle of the ocean. To the casual observer, it is a picture of absolute serenity. That serenity is a thermodynamic illusion. Beneath that relaxed posture, the sea otter is fighting a perpetual war against hypothermia, and it is a war it must win every single minute of every single day, without a drop of blubber to protect it. The sea otter relies on an entirely different strategy. It wears the densest fur in the animal kingdom. We are talking about up to 1 million hairs packed into a single square inch of skin. This fur is so thick, so intricately layered, that the cold water never actually touches the animal's skin. Instead, the fur traps a microscopic layer of air, creating a custom-built, thermoreflective wetsuit. But this suit is not passive. It requires obsessive, exhausting maintenance. If the fur becomes matted, if dirt or oil disrupts the microscopic alignment of the hairs, the ocean breaches the air layer. The cold water rushes in, touches the skin, and the thermodynamic debt is instantly called due. This is why, when it is not sleeping or eating, the otter is grooming. It is a frantic, necessary ritual. It rubs, rolls, blows air into its coat, and twists its body in a continuous effort to maintain its only defense against the freezing environment. It is not vanity, it is life support. But running a furnace this hot requires fuel, an enormous amount of fuel, because the otter is burning calories at a staggering rate just to maintain its core temperature. It must consume up to a quarter of its own body weight in food every single day. It cannot afford to graze on low-energy vegetation. It cannot afford to chase small, elusive prey that burns more calories to catch than they provide to eat. The math of the otter's survival demands high-density, calorie-rich protein. It needs the heavily armored invertebrates that carpet the rocky seafloor below. It needs the sea urchin. Down in the submerged, swaying cathedrals of the kelp forest, the sea urchin grazes along the stone. The urchin is essentially a living fortress. It is a dome of rigid, interlocking calcium carbonate plates, entirely covered in a dense thicket of long, brittle, needle-sharp spines. The dome is one of nature's strongest architectural shapes, designed to distribute crushing pressure evenly across its surface. The spines are designed to puncture, snap off, and fester in the soft tissues of anything foolish enough to bite them. Evolution built the urchin to be mathematically and physically unappetizing. To a predator relying on jaws and teeth, biting an urchin is a catastrophic risk. Enamel shatters, gums are pierced, mouths are ruined, and a predator with a ruined mouth in the wild is already dead. It just hasn't stopped breathing yet. So, the sea otter does something unprecedented. It does not try to evolve stronger teeth. It does not try to evolve a thicker skull to crush the urchins. Instead, the otter steps entirely outside the boundaries of its own anatomy. It dives. It slides beneath the canopy of the kelp, navigating the vertical columns of green, scanning the rocky substrate. It finds an urchin, plucks it from the stone, but it does not stop there. The otter begins searching the seafloor for something else. It is looking for a specific weight, a specific density, a specific shape. It is looking for a rock. When it finds the right one, the otter tucks the rock into a loose pouch of skin hidden securely beneath its armpit, a biological pocket, perfectly adapted for carrying cargo. It swims back to the surface, breaking into the cold air, and rolls onto its back. What happens next is a profound leap in evolutionary strategy. The otter places a rock flat against its chest, turning its own body into a workbench. It takes the sea urchin in its forepaws, raises it high, and brings it down against a stone with sharp, calculated, and violent crack. It does not strike wildly. The otter rotates the urchin between blows, feeling the structural integrity of the shell, finding the weak points, testing the geometry of the prey against the unforgiving density of the stone. The rock acts as a floating anvil. It absorbs the downward kinetic energy of the otter's arms and violently redirects it back up into the urchin's shell. Crack! The sound is sharp, echoing across the surface of the water, entirely out of place in the rhythmic sloshing of the waves. Crack! Within seconds, the architectural perfection of the urchin's dome suffers catastrophic failure. The calcium carbonate fractures. The spines collapse. The fortress is breached not by biology, but by geology. The otter has taken a piece of the earth, turned it into a piece of hardware, and used it to utterly bypass the urchin's millions of years of defensive evolution. This is the invention of technology. We often restrict the concept of tool use to higher primates or corvids, but here, bobbing in the freezing coastal swells, is a predator that routinely and casually outsources its violence to inanimate objects. It realized, in an evolutionary sense, that breaking teeth on calcium carbonate is a losing game. So it uses the environment to break the environment. And this is not a genetic hardwiring that an otter is simply born knowing how to execute perfectly. This is culture. This is a learned tradition. A young otter watches its mother. It observes the dive, the retrieval of the stone, the positioning on the chest, the angle of the strike. The juvenile will practice. It will drop stones. It will select rocks that are too small or too round. It will strike at the wrong angle and fail to breach the shell. It learns through observation, through trial, through a frustrating reality of going hungry because the technique was flawed. The knowledge of the anvil is passed down socially, generation to generation, varying slightly from population to population. Some otter groups favor specific types of strikes. Others prefer different prey and different tools. It is a living, breathing culture, transmitted through the physical act of survival. Once the urchin is broken, the otter consumes the rich, high-calorie roe and viscera inside, fueling the internal furnace that keeps the freezing ocean at bay. The shattered remnants of the shell are casually brushed off the chest, sinking back down into the depths, drifting like snow through the kelp fronds. And it is here, in the fallen debris of the broken urchins, that the true magnitude of the sea otter's actions reveals itself. Because this act of striking a rock against a shell on the surface of the water is not an isolated event. It is the linchpin of an entire world. The kelp forests are among the most dynamic, productive, and biologically diverse ecosystems on the planet. The giant kelp can grow up to 2 feet a day, reaching toward the sunlight, creating a massive, three-dimensional habitat that houses thousands of species of fish, invertebrates, and marine mammals. It is an underwater rainforest, but the kelp is anchored to the seafloor by structures called holdfasts, which grip the rocks. Sea urchins, if left to their own devices, are relentless, mindless grazers. They are the marine equivalent of a locust swarm. They will march across the seafloor, eating everything in their path, and their favorite food is the holdfast of the giant kelp. When an urchin chews through a holdfast, the entire kelp stalk, which may be 60 feet tall, is severed. It washes away in the tide, dying, without a predator to keep them in check. An urchin population will explode. They will consume the kelp forest from the bottom up, chewing through the foundations until the entire ecosystem collapses. What was once a towering, sun-dappled forest of life is reduced to a barren, lunar landscape of bare rock, carpeted entirely by thousands of starving, spiny urchins. This is known as an urchin barren. In an urchin barren, the fish disappear, the crabs disappear. The complex web of life simply ceases to exist because the architecture that supported it has been devoured. The sea otter is the only force standing between the kelp forest and total annihilation. Because the otter requires such an immense amount of food to fund its metabolic furnace, it hunts urchins with a staggering, almost mechanical efficiency. It dives, it retrieves, it smashes, it eats. It repeats this cycle endlessly. By exerting this massive, relentless predatory pressure on the urchins, the sea otter keeps their populations low and scattered. It forces the urchins to hide in deep crevices rather than marching openly across the reef. By simply feeding itself, by simply surviving the cold, the sea otter acts as a guardian of the entire coastal ecosystem. Where the otter floats, the urchins die. Where the urchins die, the kelp grows. Where the kelp grows, the fish breed. The carbon is pulled from the atmosphere and sequestered in the deep, and the force of the ocean waves is dampened before it can erode the shoreline. The weight of an entire ecological hemisphere rests on the chest of this small, floating mammal. Its survival strategy, its desperate, calorie-burning defiance of the cold ocean, and its brilliant, tool-wielding circumvention of armor prey, is the exact mechanism that breathes life into the coastal waters. There is no grand intent. The otter does not know it is a keystone species. It does not know it is cultivating a forest. It only knows that the water is bitterly cold. The furnace must be fed, and a rock in its pocket is the key to unlocking the calories inside the shell. It finishes its meal, the last of the urchin flesh consumed. It rolls rapidly in the water, washing the debris from its fur, immediately re-engaging in a frantic grooming process to trap the air back against its skin. The cold is always waiting, always pulling. The thermodynamic debt is never fully paid. The otter breathes the salty air, adjusts its buoyancy, and prepares to dive again. The anvil is slipped back into the pocket under the arm. The eyes scan the dark waters below. The forest stands tall around it, swaying in the current, oblivious to the fact that its existence is guaranteed solely by the sound of stones striking its shell in the freezing, open air. There's a lie we tell ourselves about armor. We look at a tank or a knight or a reinforced bunker, and we equate the presence of a hardened shell with the concept of absolute safety. We assume that if the walls are thick enough, the organism inside is exempt from the brutal mathematics of survival. In the ocean, this assumption is not just naive. It is a fatal misunderstanding of how physics and biology interact. Armor in the wild is never a guarantee. It is a negotiation. It is a biological contract that trades mobility for time, and in the apex-heavy waters of the tropical reef, time is the only currency that matters. To understand this contract, you must watch the green sea turtle. It moves through the sunlit shallows with slow, hypnotic grace, its massive foreflippers pulling the water in long, sweeping arcs. From a distance, it looks like a creature exempt from fear. Its back is covered by the carapace, a sweeping, hydrodynamically smooth dome of bone and keratin. It looks like a living stone, polished by the currents, ancient and untouchable. When you see a mature green sea turtle gliding over the seagrass beds, it is easy to believe that it has solved the problem of predation simply by walling itself off from the world. But evolution does not build impenetrable fortresses. It builds compromises. If you look closely at the architecture of the turtle's shell, the illusion of invulnerability begins to fracture. The shell is not a separate house the turtle retreats into, it is the turtle. The carapace is formed from the animal's own ribcage and spine, flattened, expanded, and fused together over millions of years, then covered in tough, overlapping plates called scuts. It is a masterpiece of structural engineering, designed to distribute the crushing force of a bite across a wide surface area. If a predator clamps down on the center of the back, the rounded geometry of the dome forces the jaws to slide off, denying the teeth the purchase they need to pierce the bone. However, a fortress that cannot move is just a tomb. The turtle must swim. It must breathe. It must eat. And to do these things, it must expose its fatal flaws. To generate thrust, the massive, muscular foreflippers must extend entirely outside protection of the shell. To steer, the hind flippers must remain exposed. To breathe at the surface or tear seagrass from the ocean floor, the neck must reach out. These soft, fleshy appendages are the cost of doing business in a calcified vault. They cannot be fully retracted. There is no trapdoor to pull shut. The turtle exists in a perpetual state of partial exposure, dragging its vulnerabilities through waters patrolled by the most perfectly engineered biting machines on the planet. The predator does not look at the turtle and see an unbreakable stone. A large tiger shark, a species that has evolved specifically to crack sea turtles open, looks at the geometry of the prey and sees the margins. The shark does not waste energy biting the top of the dome. It targets the edges. It targets the seam where the upper carapace meets the lower plastron. It targets the exposed flippers. It understands that you do not need to shatter the vault if you can simply sever the mechanisms that allow it to move. When the shadow of a tiger shark falls over the reef, the green sea turtle does not rely on armor to absorb the attack. It relies on its brain, its stamina, and its intimate knowledge of the local topography. The encounter does not begin with a frantic sprint. Panic is a luxury the turtle cannot afford, because panic burns oxygen, and oxygen is the invisible tether dictating every second of the turtle's life. When the shark initiates its approach, the turtle shifts its posture. It stops grazing. It angles its body, presenting the broad, impenetrable curve of its carapace toward the incoming threat, actively hiding its head and vulnerable neck behind the slope of its own shell. If the shark commits, accelerating into a strike, the turtle does not try to out-accelerate a torpedo of pure muscle. Instead, it turns tightly, tilting its body so that the shark's jaws meet the hardest, most steeply angled portion of the shell. The teeth scrape, the jaws glance up the keratin, and the immense kinetic energy of the shark's strike is deflected harmlessly into the water. But a deflected strike is not a victory. It is merely a delayed defeat. The shark will circle and strike again. This is where the true strategy of the green sea turtle reveals itself. It does not stand its ground. It moves purposefully and relentlessly toward the cluttered architecture of the reef. In open water, the turtle is surrounded by 360 degrees of vulnerability. The shark has infinite angles of attack. The turtle must eliminate those angles. It swims toward the coral heads, the jagged limestone outcrops, the narrow channels and shallow shelves. It threads its heavy, armored body into the chaotic geography of the seabed. By putting a solid wall of coral on its left, the turtle instantly neutralizes 50% of the shark's attack vectors. By pressing its belly close to the seafloor, it eliminates attacks from below. The turtle uses the environment as a prosthetic extension of its own shell. It turns the reef into a shield. The shark is forced to navigate the tight confines, its large pectoral fins scraping against rock, its turning radius hindered by the obstacles. The turtle weaves through gaps just wide enough for its carapace to clear, forcing the predator to either abandon pursuit or risk severe injury against the abrasive coral. The chase becomes a claustrophobic negotiation of space. The turtle isn't trying to outrun the teeth. It is trying to make the teeth mathematically impossible to apply. And as the pursuit stretches from seconds into minutes, the second hidden weapon of the sea turtle comes into play: cardiovascular endurance. A shark is a creature of explosive, devastating burst speed. Its muscles are primed for anaerobic output, designed to close the gap instantly and end a fight in a single, catastrophic flurry of violence. But this kind of biological high performance burns energy rapidly. A shark cannot sprint forever. Its muscles flood with lactic acid. Its stamina drains. The green sea turtle, conversely, is an aerobic engine of staggering efficiency. Its blood is rich in hemoglobin, capable of storing massive reserves of oxygen. Its muscles are tuned for slow, steady, continuous output. It can hold its breath for hours when resting, and even under the extreme stress of a chase, it can maintain a grueling, powerful swimming pace long after the predator's anaerobic reserves have bottomed out. The turtle's flippers beat in a steady, unbroken rhythm. It does not sprint. It simply refuses to stop. The shark realizes that the energetic cost of continuing pursuit through a maze of sharp coral against an animal that will not tire is no longer worth the caloric reward. The apex predator breaks off, turning its massive head toward easier, softer prey. The turtle survives. But survival is not clean, and it is never free. If you examine the carapace of an old green sea turtle, you are looking at a ledger of violence. The shell is not smooth. It is marred by deep, curving gouges where serrated teeth fail to find purchase. Sections of the marginal scuts at the edges may be chipped or missing entirely. The trailing edges of the rear flippers are often ragged, bearing the crescent-shaped scars of near misses, of moments where the margin between life and death was measured in the width of a single scale. These scars tell the true story of armor. The shell does not prevent the attack. It simply ensures that the attack is survivable. It buys the turtle the seconds it needs to angle away, the minutes it needs to reach the reef, the hours it needs to outlast the predator's stamina. The armor absorbs attacks of living in a hostile world, taking the damage so the vital organs do not have to. But the constant threat of this violence profoundly shapes the turtle's psychological and behavioral existence. A green sea turtle cannot afford to be careless. Its daily routine is a masterclass in risk management. It sleeps with one eye figuratively, and sometimes literally, open. When it rests, it wedges its body beneath deep coral overhangs or into submerged caves, ensuring that its exposed flippers and head are tucked as far away from the entrance as possible, presenting only the impenetrable dome of its back to the open ocean. It times its feeding carefully, often grazing on the seagrass meadows during shifting tides or specific light conditions when the glare of the sun or the turbidity of the water makes it harder for large predators to spot them from below. This grazing behavior highlights the final, perhaps most crucial aspect of the green sea turtle's existence. It is not just a survivor. It is an ecological architect. The green sea turtle is one of the few large herbivores in the ocean. Its jaw is serrated, perfectly adapted for tearing tough blades of seagrass. When a turtle feeds, it does not rip the grass out by the roots. It crops the blades just a few inches above the sediment. This precise method of grazing is vital for the health of the seagrass meadow. By constantly trimming the older, epiphyte-covered upper portions of the grass, the turtle stimulates the plant to grow fresh, nutrient-rich new blades. A seagrass bed grazed by a turtle is healthier, denser, and faster growing than an unraised bed. It sequesters carbon from the atmosphere more efficiently. It provides a safer, more robust nursery for thousands of species of juvenile fish and invertebrates. The turtle, acting as a meticulous underwater gardener, engineers the very foundation of the coastal ecosystem. The energy it extracts from the grass fuels the massive aerobic engine that allows it to survive the jaws of the shark. And in return, its grazing ensures the grass meadow thrives. The turtle finishes its feeding. It lifts its head, eyes scanning the blue gradient of the surrounding water, processing the shadows, feeling the subtle shifts in water pressure through its skin. The oxygen clock in its blood signals that it is time to breathe. It kicks its heavy flippers, angling its armored dome toward the bright, shimmering surface above. It rises slowly, exposing its pale underbelly, arguably its most vulnerable moment. It breaks the surface, exhales with sharp, explosive hiss, and draws in a deep lungful of air. In that brief second at the boundary between water and sky, the fortress is entirely open, but within a heartbeat. The breath is secured, the head tucks, and the heavy carapace breaches the surface, driving the animal back down into the safety of the depths. It glides back toward the reef, an ancient, scarred, and heavily burdened traveler. It has survived another day not because it is untouchable, but because it understands exactly how touchable it is. It knows the limits of its bone, the stamina of its muscles, and the geometry of its world. In the brutal mathematics of the ocean, the green sea turtle proves that you do not need to be invincible to conquer time. You just need to know how to endure the damage, protect your margins, and never, ever stop swimming. There are two ways to survive in an ocean that wants to eat you. The first is to be undeniable, to build a shell so thick, or swim so fast, or grow so large that the mathematics of predation simply do not apply to you. You announce your presence and dare the world to do something about it. The second way is much quieter. It is the path of absolute, unwavering denial. You do not fight the world. You simply refuse to participate in it. If you look down at the shallow sand flats, where the sunlight plays in shifting, hypnotic webs across the seafloor, you are looking at an empty room. The sand is pale, gently rippled by the tidal surge. Fragments of broken shell roll lazily in the current. It is a transitional space, a desert between the bustling metropolises of the coral reefs and the deep blue drop-offs. Predators cross this space, moving fast, their eyes scanning for silhouettes. But they see nothing. The emptiness is a masterpiece of deception. Beneath the seemingly undisturbed sediment, the floor is breathing. A stingray does not hide in the sand. It becomes the sand. Its body is a flattened disc. Its pectoral fins fuse to its head, creating a sprawling, two-dimensional kite of flesh and cartilage. When it settles onto the bottom, it flutters the edges of its fins, throwing a thin blanket of sediment over its back until its outline is entirely erased. It does not look like a fish. It does not look like prey. It looks like topography. Only the eyes remain exposed, sitting high on the dorsal surface, gazing upward like twin periscopes into the lethal, three-dimensional sky of the open water. Just behind the eyes, spiracles rhythmically pump clear water down into the hidden gills, a silent exhaust system that prevents the animal from suffocating in its own camouflage. This is the art of erasure. The stingray is a predator itself, but a specialized one. Its mouth is located entirely on its underside, a crushing mill designed to pulverize clams, crabs, and worms hiding in the substrate. It is an animal built to look down, to grind through the dirt. But because it lives pinned to the floor, it is intensely vulnerable to anything that looks down at it. To a large hammerhead shark or a massive grouper, a stingray caught in the open is a high-calorie feast with no escape routes. A flattened body cannot generate the explosive 0 to 60 acceleration of a torpedo-shaped fish. The stingray cannot outsprint a shark. It cannot duck into a coral crevice. When danger descends from above, the flatlander has nowhere to run. So, it relies on a contingency plan. It relies on a weapon that it never wants to use, mounted in a direction it never wants to face. Trailing behind the broad, kite-like body is the tail. It is long, whip-like, and seemingly fragile. But positioned partway down this appendage, lying flat and pointing backward toward the rear, is a modified dermal denticle. It is a blade of hardened cartilage, serrated like a steak knife, and sheathed in a fragile venom-laced skin. This is the rear-facing knife, and its placement is a stroke of brutal, evolutionary genius. We tend to think of animal weapons as tools for hunting: the claws of a lion, the teeth of a wolf, the beak of an eagle. Offensive weapons point forward. They are designed to be driven into prey. But the stingray's barb points backward, resting completely useless for the purpose of catching food. It is a strictly defensive mechanism. It exists solely to punish anything that attacks the ray from behind or above. It is a biological landmine. The stingray's survival strategy is predicated on the hope that the camouflage holds. When a massive shadow passes over the sand flat, the ray does not bolt. Fleeing would instantly betray its position, triggering the chase reflexes of predator. Instead, the ray freezes. It slows its breathing. It trusts the sand. It allows the danger to pass within inches. But camouflage is a game of probabilities, and eventually the math fails. A shark's electroreceptors might pick up the faint, rhythmic voltage of the stingray's beating heart. Or perhaps a predator just gets lucky, investigating a strange contour in the sand. The predator dives, jaws opening, expecting the soft, fleshy disc of an easy meal. The stingray's response is not a conscious decision. There is no time for the brain to weigh options, calculate angles, and issue commands. The response is a hardwired, lightning-fast reflex, triggered by pressure, by the disruption of the water, by the physical touch of an enemy. In a fraction of a millisecond, the stingray's back arches. The base of the tail flexes with immense muscular force, whipping the long appendage upward and forward over Ray's own body in a blindingly fast, scorpion-like strike. The predator does not see it coming. The strike is a blur of motion terminating in a sudden, catastrophic impact. The barb is driven deep into the attacker's flesh, into a jaw, a gill slit, an underbelly, or a snout. The sheer velocity of the tail whip allows the relatively small spine to punch through tough, cartilaginous skin with ease. But the true horror of the barb is not the entry. It is the exit. The serrations along the edge of the blade are angled backward, like the barbs on a fishing hook. As the stingray violently retracts its tail to free itself, those serrations catch. They tear. They rip through muscle and tissue, turning a clean puncture wound into a ragged, devastating laceration. And as the blade tears its way out, the thin, membranous sheath covering the spine ruptures, flooding the open wound with a highly complex, fiercely potent venom. If the goal of a hunting venom, like that of a cobra or a spider, is to kill the prey so it can be eaten, the goal of the stingray's venom is entirely different. The stingray does not want to kill the shark. Killing takes too long. A dying shark can still bite. The stingray's venom is designed for one specific, singular purpose: absolute, immediate, paralyzing agony. The venom is a cocktail of enzymes and neurotoxins that attack the nervous system, causing blood vessels to constrict and cellular tissue to break down. But its primary effect is the induction of a pain so sudden, so all-encompassing, and so structurally overwhelming that it completely crashes the predator's operating system. Pain, in the animal kingdom, is a behavioral modifier. It is an alarm bell that screams, "Withdraw," when the venom hits the predator's bloodstream. The instinct to hunt is instantly overridden by the desperate, blinding need to escape the source of the agony. The shark recoils, its jaws snapping on empty water, its body thrashing as a chemical fire spreads through its nervous system. In that moment of chaotic, agonizing distraction, The stingray abandons its camouflage. The edges of its fins undulate in a rapid, rippling wave. It lifts off the seafloor like a phantom, banking hard and flying away through the water column, leaving a cloud of disturbed sediment and a crippled predator in its wake. The encounter is over. The stingray does not look back. It does not press its advantage. It simply glides away, finds a new patch of sand, flutters its fins, and vanishes once again into the floor of the ocean. To truly appreciate this animal, you have to understand the deep economic cost of its weapon. The stingray does not want to use the barb. Carrying it is a burden. The spine creates hydrodynamic drag, making the ray slightly less efficient when it swims. Manufacturing the complex proteins of the venom requires a constant expenditure of metabolic energy, energy that could otherwise be used for growth or reproduction. Furthermore, the strike itself is risky. The barb can snap off and remain lodged in the predator, while the stingray can slowly regenerate a lost spine. For months afterward, it will be operating with diminished defenses. The weapon is a heavy tax levied on the animal's biology. Therefore, the strike is always the absolute last resort. A stingray that strikes is a stingray whose primary defense, its invisibility, has failed. It is an animal that has been pushed to the absolute brink. This context fundamentally changes how we view human interactions with these creatures. When a person wades into the shallow, warm waters of a tropical beach and feels the sudden, excruciating strike of a stingray barb into their foot or ankle, it is easy to brand the animal as a malicious attacker. But the stingray is completely blind to human intent. It does not know what a human is. What the stingray experiences is a massive, crushing weight suddenly pinning its wing to the sand. To the buried animal, that pressure registers as the jaws of a predator clamping down. The reflex fires. The tail whips. The venom is delivered. It is not an act of aggression. It is an act of desperate self-preservation triggered by a tragic misunderstanding of weight and placement. We are collateral damage in a war between the flatlander and the predators of the deep. This is why local populations learn the stingray shuffle, sliding their feet through the sand rather than stepping down. The shuffling motion sends acoustic and vibrational warnings through the water. It alerts the stingray's highly tuned sensory array, giving the animal the time it actually wants. The time to quietly lift off the sand and swim away before contact is ever made. Because beneath the sand, the stingray is listening. It does not rely purely on its eyes to detect threats. Strewn across its underside and around its mouth are tiny gel-filled pores called the ampullae of Lorenzini. These are electroreceptors. They are so sensitive they can detect the microscopic electrical fields generated by the muscle contractions and beating hearts of animals moving through the water above. A stingray buried in the dark, under an inch of sediment, can literally feel the electrical signature of a shark passing overhead. It tracks the ghost of the predator's biology. It calculates the proximity, the trajectory, the intent, all without ever seeing the animal. It waits in the dark, monitoring the invisible currents of electricity, hoping the signature fades, hoping the shadow moves on. This hidden sensory world paints a very different picture of the ocean floor. It is not an empty desert. It is a highly charged, intensely monitored security zone. Over evolutionary time, the stingray's rear-facing knife has shaped the behavior of the entire ecosystem. Predators learn. A shark that survives a face full of stingray venom remembers the shape of the ray. It remembers the contour of the sand. It learns to associate the flat, kite-like silhouette with unacceptable consequences. Some specialized predators have evolved workarounds, approaching at extreme speeds, trying to pin the tail before the reflex can fire, or flipping the ray entirely upside down to expose its vulnerable underbelly. But for the vast majority of the ocean's hunters, the stingray simply represents a bad investment. The cost of failure is too high. The pain is too profound. The ocean is full of easier meals that do not fight back with chemical fire. And so, the stingray wins by making itself economically unviable to consume. It rests on the bottom, a master of the waiting game. It breathes the water. It feels the pulse of the ocean through its skin, and it trusts the sand. It is a creature of deep, abiding patience, holding a dagger in the dark, asking nothing of the world except to be left completely, utterly alone. Every machine has a breaking point. In the natural world, the limits of the machine are dictated by flesh, bone, and the density of the medium it operates within. Water is thick. It resists movement. It demands that predators be streamlined, that they invest in sweeping tails and undulating spines to overcome its drag. For millions of years, the evolutionary arms race in the ocean has been a contest of pushing against water. But there's a creature hiding in the shattered limestone rubble of the reef that looked at the heavy, resisting mass of the ocean and decided to stop pushing against it. It decided instead to tear it apart. If you drift down to the coral graveyard, where the living reef gives way to a sprawling landscape of broken rubble, sand, and shadowed crevices, you must look closely. The architecture here is jagged, holes the landscape. To a wandering crab, these cavities look like refuge. But look inside one of those narrow, thumbwood burrows, and you'll find an animal that does not fit the standard profile of a predator. You'll see the eyes first. They do not look like they belong to a biological organism. They look like the sensor suite of a deep space satellite. Mounted on independent stalks, they swivel and track with a jerky mechanical precision. The mantis shrimp possesses the most terrifyingly advanced visual system on the planet. Where human beings have 3 types of color-receptive cones in our eyes, giving us the spectrum of the rainbow, the mantis shrimp has 16. They see wavelengths of ultraviolet and infrared that are fundamentally invisible to us. They can process circularly polarized light, a secret channel of visual data that turns a chaotic, shadowed interior reef into a highly contrasted, brightly lit tactical map. But the true horror of these eyes is not what they see. It is how they measure. Each individual eye possesses trinocular vision. A single eye can gauge depth, distance, and motion perfectly all by itself. When both eyes lock onto a target, the mantis shrimp is not guessing. It is compiling a flawless, real-time targeting solution. It measures a precise millimeter where the prey is, and the exact millisecond it will occupy the space ahead. In a world where a missed strike means a broken limb or a lost meal, the mantis shrimp does not gamble. It calculates. It calculates because it has to. The mantis shrimp does not chase. It does not have the stamina to pursue a fleeing fish or the bulk to wrestle a large crab in the open. It is an ambush predator, but it does not ambush with venom or a sudden bite. It invites its prey to make a fatal geographic error. It waits for the wandering victim to step just an inch too close to the burrow's entrance. When the crab crosses an invisible threshold, the mantis shrimp unleashes a weapon that breaks the fundamental rules of contact mechanics. The raptorial appendages, folded tightly under the creature's chin like the arms of a praying mantis, are cocked back. They are held under immense tension by a specialized biological spring system, a latch mechanism that stores up muscle energy until the breaking point, and then the latch releases. The strike of a peacock mantis shrimp is one of the fastest movements in the animal kingdom. The club at the end of the appendage accelerates to the speed of a .22 caliber bullet. It moves so incredibly fast that the human eye cannot even process the motion. We only see the blur of the aftermath. But the true violence of the strike is not the impact itself. It is what the impact does to the water. As the hardened club snaps forward, it moves faster than the water molecules around it can physically get out of the way. The club tears a hole in the ocean. It creates a pocket of extreme low pressure behind it, a near vacuum. The water literally boils at room temperature, vaporizing into a cloud of tiny, unstable bubbles. When the club strikes a crab, the calcium carbonate shell instantly caves inward. Armor is designed to stop teeth. It is designed to resist the slow, grinding compression of a jaw. It is completely unprepared for the kinetic shockwave of a ballistic impact. The shell fractures, a devastating web of spiderweb cracks, spreading across the crab's defenses. But the prey is not hit once. It is hit twice. A fraction of a millisecond after the club makes contact, the vacuum bubbles created by the tear in the water can no longer sustain themselves. They collapse inward with catastrophic force. This phenomenon is called cavitation. When those bubbles implode, they release a shockwave of their own. For a fleeting, almost imperceptible microsecond, the collapse generates a localized spike of heat that rivals the surface of the sun, accompanied by a faint flash of light known as sonoluminescence. This collapsing cavitation bubble delivers the secondary strike. It is a shockwave of pure physics that hits the already fractured shell of the crab. It drives the cracks deeper, pulverizing the internal tissues, liquefying the animal inside its own ruined armor. Even if the mantis shrimp's club slightly misses its target and only lands a glancing blow, the concussive force of the collapsing water is often enough to stun or kill the prey outright. The mantis shrimp defeats armor by weaponizing the physical limits of water itself. It converts velocity into phase change. In that terrifying fraction of a second, the crab is not fighting an animal. It is fighting thermodynamics. To wield a weapon this destructive requires a structure that defies logic. Newton's third law of motion dictates that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. If you hit a solid object with the speed of a bullet, the force rebounding up your arm should shatter your own bones into dust. If you or I punched a concrete wall at 50 miles per hour, our hand would be obliterated. How does the mantis shrimp survive its own punch? How does it strike thousands of times over its lifespan without turning its own weapons into shrapnel? The answer lies beneath a microscope, deep within the architecture of the club itself. The club is not made of solid, unyielding stone. It is a highly complex biological composite material, arguably more advanced than anything engineered in modern human laboratories. The outer layer is heavily mineralized with hydroxyapatite, the same incredibly dense material found in human teeth, providing a hardened impact surface. But beneath that hard outer shell, the club is composed of layers of chitin fibers. These fibers are not laid down in straight lines. They are arranged in a spiraling, helicoidal structure, a twisting staircase of organic material. When the club impacts a crab shell, the shock wave of the collision travels backward into the weapon. But instead of traveling in a straight line and splitting the club in half, the energy hits that spiraling staircase. The shock wave is forced to travel around and around the spirals, diffusing its energy, bleeding off a destructive force before it can reach the core of the arm. The club is designed with microscopic, controlled microfractures. It absorbs the trauma by allowing tiny, harmless breaks that stop catastrophic failure. Evolution did not just build a sledgehammer. It built a smart hammer, a weapon designed to inflict maximum devastation while perfectly insulating the wielder from the fallout. This weapon is deployed in a highly specific theater of war. The mantis shrimp is intimately tied to its burrow. It does not wander the reef looking for fights. It spends obsessive amount of time excavating, cleaning, and reinforcing its tunnel. The burrow is a fortress, yes, but it is primarily a kill box. In open water, a crab might be able to backpedal. It might be able to absorb some of the kinetic energy of a blow by allowing its body to be pushed backward, riding the punch. But inside or just outside the burrow, the geometry is manipulated by the shrimp. The crab backs away from the terrifying eyes and presses its shell against the unyielding limestone of the reef wall. By pinning the prey against stone, the mantis shrimp ensures that 100% of the kinetic energy is transferred directly into the armor. There is nowhere for the force to go but through the crab. It is an execution in confinement. Every survival instinct of the prey, to back away, to huddle against a solid surface, to present its thickest armor, plays exactly into the mathematical trap the mantis shrimp has set. But there is a heavy tax levied on the owner of this weapon. Biology demands payment for extreme performance. Fast-twitch muscle fibers, the kind required to accelerate a club to terminal velocity, are incredibly inefficient. They burn massive amounts of metabolic energy. The mantis shrimp cannot punch endlessly. It is not a machine gun. It is a single-shot cannon with a long reload time. After a flurry of strikes, the animal experiences severe physiological exhaustion. Its oxygen consumption spikes dramatically. The cellular ion gradients in its muscles are depleted and must be painstakingly restored. This physiological constraint dictates its entire psychology. The mantis shrimp is deeply, inherently patient. It must be. It cannot afford to swing its shadows. It cannot waste its energy on prey that is too small to provide a caloric return or too agile to guarantee a hit. It calculates the risk, measures the distance, and waits for absolute certainty. Every single strike is a massive expenditure of currency, and the mantis shrimp balances its checkbook with ruthless efficiency. What happens then when two of these heavily armed assassins cross paths? What happens when two biological firearms, perfectly designed to obliterate armor, decide they want the same piece of real estate? You might expect an explosive, mutually assured destruction, a chaotic flurry of strikes that leaves both animals shattered. But nature is rarely so careless with its apex designs. When two mantis shrimp dispute a burrow, the encounter is highly ritualized. It is governed by strict rules of engagement, communicated through the flashing of brilliantly colored marrow spots on their appendages and the reflection of polarized light. They speak a private, visual language of warnings and threats. If the dispute escalates to physical violence, it does not devolve into a brawl. It becomes a measured, structured assessment. The defending shrimp will curl its heavily armored tail section, the telson, in front of its body, using it as a specialized riot shield. The attacking shrimp will wind up and deliver a full power strike directly to the telson. They take turns. One strikes, the other absorbs. Then they switch. They are not trying to kill each other. They are testing the structural integrity of the opponent's weapon and armor. The impact resonates through the bodies. They can feel the microscopic fatigue in the opponent's chitin, sense the density of the club, assess the sheer kinetic yield of the blow. The loser, the one whose armor cracks first or whose club fails to deliver sufficient force, concedes the territory and retreats. It is a brutal mathematical sparring match where failure means exile but rarely death. The real estate is too valuable, and the weapons are too dangerous for blind rage. The presence of such a predator sends invisible shockwaves through the entire reef ecosystem. The fear of the mantis shrimp reorganizes the architecture of the ocean floor. Snails that share territory with the mantis shrimp do not just grow thicker shells. A thicker shell can still be shattered by cavitation. Instead, over generations, these snails evolve intricate, ridged, and spiky shells. These ridges are not meant to stop the punch. They are meant to redirect the shockwave, forcing the kinetic energy to travel along non-lethal paths, preventing the main body of the shell from caving in. They change their geometry to survive the physics. Other crustaceans change their schedules, becoming strictly nocturnal, learning to avoid the entrances of the dark holes during the day. Even small fish, which are agile enough to avoid the punch, learn to recognize the subtle visual cues of a mantis shrimp burrow and give it a wide berth. The footprint of the mantis shrimp extends far beyond the reach of its club. It influences the grazing patterns of herbivores, which in turn dictates where the algae grows, which shapes the competition between the coral polyps. We look at the ocean and see a chaotic swirl of life, a mosaic of colors and drifting shadows. But step closer, zoom into the scale of the broken rubble, and you find a world ruled by uncompromising rules. The mantis shrimp stands as a testament to evolutionary extremes. It is the answer to the problem of impenetrable armor. When shells grew too thick for teeth, when claws failed to find purchase, biology did not give up. It simply changed the rules of the game. It abandoned contact mechanics. It conscripted the water itself, turning the ocean into a hammer, and proved that no matter how hard you build your fortress, there's always something waiting in the dark that knows how to vaporize a moat. To understand the open ocean, you must first understand the terrifying reality of limitless space. Down in the coral reefs, survival is dictated by geography. There are walls to put your back against, crevices to hide within, and shadows to wear like camouflage. The reef is a chaotic, crowded city where every inch of limestone is contested, and danger is something that leaps from the dark. But when you leave the drop-off and swim out into the pelagic blue, all of that architecture vanishes. There are no walls here. There is no floor. There is only a three-dimensional void of suspended, crushing water, stretching out into a terrifying, featureless infinity. In this environment, you cannot hide. You can only move. Suspended in this endless blue is a massive, shifting silver cloud. It is a bait ball, a school of thousands of small fish, moving as a single, synchronized superorganism. They maintain their perfect spacing through a lateral line system. A network of sensory pores running down their flanks that allows them to feel the microscopic pressure waves created by the fish next to them. They do not need to look at their neighbors to know where they're going. They simply feel the collective fluid dynamics of the school. It is a masterpiece of collective defense, a swirling vortex of silver scales designed to confuse the eyes of any predator that attempts to single out an individual. But the predator that is coming for them does not care about singling out individuals. It does not possess the teeth to bite them, the venom to paralyze them, or the aggression to chase them. And yet, Its arrival will shatter the school with the catastrophic inevitability of a natural disaster. A shadow materializes out of the deep blue gloom. It does not swim. It glides. It is a manta ray, and its silhouette is one of the most majestic and alien shapes on planet Earth. Its body is a flattened diamond of cartilage and muscle, spanning up to 25 feet across from wingtip to wingtip. It weighs over 2 tons. As it approaches, it undulates its massive pectoral fins in slow, hypnotic, devastatingly powerful waves. It looks like a colossal bird flying through a liquid atmosphere. There is a profound, almost tragic irony to the manta ray. It is one of the largest animals in the sea, yet it feeds exclusively on the absolute smallest. It is a filter feeder. Its target is plankton, microscopic copepods, krill, and the floating larval stages of reef creatures. It possesses a mouth wide enough to swallow a human being whole, but is entirely devoid of functional teeth. Instead, the inside of its mouth is lined with intricate, feather-like structures called gill rakers, designed to sieve microscopic protein from the water. When you look at a manta ray, you see a creature of absolute peace. It is the ocean's gentle giant, an animal completely unequipped for violence. It cannot sting. It cannot bite. It cannot crush. But the ocean does not operate on intent. The ocean operates on physics. And the fundamental law of physics in a liquid medium is that mass multiplied by motion equals sheer, unavoidable force. When an animal weighing 2,000 kilograms moves through the water, it does not slip through it silently. It drags the ocean with it. Water is heavy. It is nearly 800 times denser than air. To move through it requires displacing it, and a manta ray displaces water on an industrial scale. As the manta approaches a bait ball, the fish do not register it as a visual threat. They do not recognize the slow, sweeping wings as a jagged silhouette of a shark or the torpedo shape of a tuna, but their lateral lines, those incredibly sensitive pressure sensors, begin to scream. Before the manta ray even touches the school, it projects a hydrodynamic shockwave ahead of it. The water directly in front of the manta is compressed, pushed forward by the colossal blunt force of its body. The water flowing over the top of its broad back accelerates, creating a massive drop in pressure, a localized vacuum similar to the forces that lift a commercial airliner off a runway. And trailing directly off the tips of its massive wings are violent, spiraling vortices of water, underwater tornadoes spun up by the sheer drag of its wingspan. The manta ray is not just an animal. It is a localized weather system. The school of fish attempts to part. The superorganism tries to split and flow around the incoming mass, executing the same evasive maneuver it uses against dolphins or marlin. But the math of the school fails against the sheer volume of the manta's wake. The manta glides directly through the center of the fish. It unfurls its cephalic fins, the 2 horn-like appendages on front of its face, using them as scoops to funnel the microscopic plankton into its gaping mouth. It ignores the bait fish completely. To the manta, the fish are just background noise, a nuisance, the equivalent of gnats buzzing around a grazing elephant. But to the fish, the passage of the manta is a cataclysm. The perfectly spaced fluid dynamics of the school are obliterated. Fish caught in the compressed water ahead of the ray are shoved violently backward. Fish caught in the low-pressure zone above its back are suddenly sucked downward, their swim bladders utterly failing to compensate for the sudden loss of depth control. And the fish unfortunate enough to be caught near the wingtips are caught in the swirling vortices. They are spun out of control, violently tumbled end over end, their inner ears and sensory lines completely overwhelmed by the chaotic turbulence. The manta ray never lays a single millimeter of its skin against them. It doesn't have to. The collateral hydrodynamics do all the damage. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of small fish are left stunned, disoriented, and separated from the safety of the school. They float in the open blue, twitching, struggling to right themselves, their perfectly coordinated defense mechanism utterly shattered by the passing of a peaceful giant. This is where the true, dark ecological role of the manta ray reveals itself. Because in the open ocean, nothing goes unnoticed, and chaos is the greatest dinner bell of all. Shadowing the manta ray, hovering just below it in the deeper, darker water, are the true predators. Sharks, trevally, tuna. They follow the massive ray on its migrations, but they are not hunting the manta. A healthy adult manta is far too large, too powerful, and too fast to be a viable target. Instead, the predators are using the manta ray as a biological plow. They know that wherever the giant goes, order breaks down. They wait for the manta to sweep through the bait balls. They wait for the hydrodynamic shockwave to scatter the fish. And the moment the manta passes, leaving a trail of stunned, tumbling, isolated prey in its wake, the predators strike. The water erupts into a frenzy of silver and red. The sharks dart through the disorganized remnants of school, snapping up the fish that are too dizzy to coordinate an evasion. The tuna accelerate into the gaps, capitalizing on the panic. They do not have to work to break the school's defenses. The manta ray did the heavy lifting for them, simply by existing. The manta ray is an unwitting accomplice to a massacre. It is a harbinger of death, completely innocent of the violence it facilitates. And what is happening inside the mind of manta while all of this transpires? It is a mind worth considering, because manta rays possess the largest brain-to-body mass ratio of any cold-blooded fish on Earth. They are exceptionally intelligent. They have been observed passing the mirror test, showing signs of self-awareness. They engage in complex, synchronized social behaviors, barrel rolling in massive feeding chains that require intricate communication and spatial coordination. They remember specific divers. They navigate migration routes that span thousands of miles of featureless ocean, guided by internal magnetic compasses and the deep topography of the seabed. Their sensory world is vastly more complex than the fish they are inadvertently stunning. Like the stingray, they possess the ampullae of Lorenzini. Their entire face is peppered with electroreceptors. As they glide through the water, they can literally feel the static electricity generated by the massive clouds of microscopic plankton. They taste the ocean's chemistry. They feel the pull of the moon on the tides. But despite this incredible intelligence, despite this heightened sensory awareness, the manta ray remains profoundly indifferent to the macroscopic carnage in its wake. It does not look back. It does not alter its wing beats to spare the bait fish. It simply continues to feed, locking its massive jaws open, pushing thousands of gallons of water over its gills, extracting the microscopic fuel it needs to keep its 2-ton body suspended in the void. This indifference is not cruelty. Cruelty requires malice, and malice requires intent. The manta ray is empty of both. It is a creature constrained by the absolute necessities of its own scale. When you are that large and your food source is that small, your only option is perpetual, massive displacement. You cannot tiptoe through the ocean. Every movement you make is a heavy, blunt force negotiation with the water itself. We are culturally conditioned to view nature through a lens of intent. We look at a great white shark and see a monster because it possesses teeth and actively seeks to consume flesh. We look at a manta ray and see an angel of the deep, a peaceful, soaring spirit, because it lacks the hardware of a killer. But the bait ball spinning out of control in the wake of the ray's wingtip does not care about intent. To a small fish, the teeth of a shark and the pressure wave of a manta result in the exact same outcome: death in the open blue. The manta ray forces us to reevaluate what danger actually means. It strips away the theatricality of predation. It removes the fangs, the venom, the ambush, and the aggressive pursuit. It replaces them with the cold, unfeeling laws of fluid dynamics. It teaches us that you do not need to want to destroy something in order to destroy it. You only need to be large enough, and you only need to move. As the feeding ends, the density of the plankton thins out. The manta ray closes its massive mouth. It sweeps its cephalic fins back into tight, streamlined spirals alongside its head, transforming them into aerodynamic points to reduce drag. It banks smoothly, dipping one colossal wing toward the abyss and raising the other toward the sun. It accelerates. The sheer power of its musculature propels it forward, transitioning from a slow, grazing glide into a swift, effortless flight. The water parts before it and closes behind it, sealing the scar of its passage. The opportunistic sharks have finished cleaning up the stunned fish and disperse back into the gloom. The surviving bait fish slowly begin to regather, their lateral lines searching for the comforting pressure of their neighbors, frantically trying to rebuild the superorganism. The manta ray disappears into the limitless blue distance, embarking on the next leg of a journey that will take it across oceans. It leaves the chaos behind, completely undisturbed by the violence it accidentally authored. It is a monument to the terrifying power of presence. It stands as proof that in the deep ocean, peace is an illusion, and mass is an inescapable weapon. Because when you weigh 2 tons, even your gentlest passing is a storm. There is a fundamental psychology to how we perceive danger. We are conditioned to associate the threat of violence with speed, stealth, or the visceral display of sharp edges. The shark commands respect because its silhouette is a blade cutting through the blue. The moray eel instills fear because it strikes in the shadows like a loaded spring. We look for the snarl, the tension, the coiled anticipation of a predator about to commit to the kill. But the ocean is vast, and evolution has authored more than one way to break a body. Sometimes, the most absolute form of dominance does not need to hide, and it certainly does not need to rush. Sometimes, dominance is a slow, unbothered patrol through the most brightly lit avenues of the sea, where the reef shelf flattens out. Bathed in the glaring, unforgiving light of tropical sun, the architecture of the seabed changes. This is not the claustrophobic labyrinth of the deep crevices, nor the featureless void of the open water. This is a public square. It is a sprawling landscape of massive coral heads and open sandy basins. In this environment, you cannot rely on ambush. If you move here, you are seen by everything. To hunt in the sunlit shallows, an animal must either be faster than its prey's ability to panic, or it must be so fundamentally overpowering that the prey's panic is irrelevant. Into this open arena drifts a shape that seems to mock the very concept of predatory urgency. It is a Napoleon fish, also known as a humphead wrasse, and its presence commands a space not with speed, but with the gravitational pull of sheer, unapologetic mass. It is a colossal animal, easily growing to the size of a grown man, moving with deliberate, rhythmic sweeps of its pectoral fins. Its coloration is a complex, almost aristocratic tapestry of muted electric blues and vibrant, maize-like greens, contrasting sharply with the severe, muscular thickness of its body. But it is the face of the Napoleon fish that demands attention, and it is a face that completely betrays our expectations of a killer. It bears a massive, protruding hump on its forehead, a heavy, fleshy dome that gives the animal its imperial name. Below that dome, its eyes pivot with a placid, unreadable calm, and its mouth is framed by lips that are absurdly thick, soft, and protruding. It does not look menacing. It looks almost comical, bloated, and entirely devoid of the sharp, jagged weaponry we associate with the apex tier of the food chain. When smaller fish see it coming, they do not scatter in frantic terror. They simply drift aside, yielding the right of way to something that carries the immovable momentum of a slow-moving freight train. The Napoleon fish ignores them completely. Its focus is not on the darting, flashing silver shapes in the water column. Its focus is directed downward, toward the unyielding, jagged terrain of the reef floor itself. The reef floor is littered with organisms that have chosen a very specific evolutionary gamble. They are the crabs wedged tightly into the coral branches. They are the heavy, spiral mollusks dragging themselves across the rubble. Most notably, they are the sea urchins, gripping the stone with hundreds of tube feet, presenting a flawless, spherical defense of venomous, calcified needles. These creatures do not rely on speed. They rely on the assumption that biology has a hard limit. Their entire existence is predicated on a single mathematical equation. If my armor is denser than the enamel of your teeth, and if my spines are sharper than the tissue of your gums, you cannot eat me. For millions of years, this equation has held true against the vast majority of the ocean's mouths. Armor works because biting is an act of reciprocal force. If a predator bites a sea urchin, the force required to shatter the shell is reflected back into the predator's own skull. For most fish, attempting to consume this kind of prey is a suicidal endeavor. The spines pierce, the gums tear, the jaw fractures, and the predator starves. The Napoleon fish drifts over the urchin, its massive shadow blocking out the sun. It does not circle. It does not prod or test the defenses. It simply dips its heavy, domed head toward the stone and opens its mouth. The bite, when it happens, is anticlimactic. There is no violent snapping of jaws, no frenzied thrashing to tear the prey free from a rock. The Napoleon fish employs a steady, calculated, and overwhelming pressure. The lips, those absurdly thick, fleshy cushions, envelop the urchin. They press down against a terrible forest of spines. This is the first secret of the Napoleon fish. The lips are not an aesthetic quirk. They are biological shock absorbers. They are dense, pliable, and incredibly resilient, designed specifically to seal around jagged edges, toxic needles, and irregular, jagged shells without sustaining catastrophic damage. They act as a heavy, protective gasket, shielding the delicate internal tissues of the mouth from the defensive hardware of the prey. The Napoleon fish grips the urchin and, with a subtle shift of its massive neck musculature, simply lifts the heavily armed fortress off the rock and swallows it into its oral cavity. If you were to pause time in this exact second, the prey might believe its strategy had worked. The urchin is inside the mouth, yes, but its dome is intact. Its spines are unbroken. The oral jaws of the Napoleon fish did not crush it. The armor held. The primary defense survived the primary attack. In the evolutionary playbook of the crab or the urchin, surviving the initial bite means a predator will soon realize its mistake, spit the uncomfortable mouthful out, and swim away. But the Napoleon fish is not like other predators. It does not need to defeat your armor at the front door. It only needs to get you inside the house. Because the true violence of the Napoleon fish does not happen in the mouth. It happens in the throat. As the urchin is passed backward, deeper into the dark, muscular tunnel of the fish's anatomy, it crosses a threshold from which nothing returns. Hidden deep within the throat, completely invisible from the outside, lies a secondary jaw system. These are the pharyngeal jaws. Many fish possess rudimentary pharyngeal teeth used for basic swallowing or moving food toward the stomach. But the pharyngeal jaws of Napoleon fish are an absolute masterpiece of biomechanical destruction. They are robust, heavily calcified, flattened plates of bone, powered by an entirely separate, massively over-engineered muscular network. They are not designed for holding. They are not designed for slicing. They are designed exclusively for catastrophic, industrial-grade crushing. This is why the Napoleon fish possesses that strange, bulbous forehead. The dome is not a decorative crown. It is an engine block. It houses the heavy, anchored musculature required to generate the immense torque and sustained, grinding pressure of the pharyngeal crusher. The entire front half of the animal's body is a mobile support system for a hidden hydraulic press. When the urchin reaches the pharyngeal jaws, the true execution begins. The throat muscles contract. The flattened bony plates engage, gripping the intact sphere of the urchin, and then they simply bear down. The Napoleon fish does not shake its head. It does not rely on momentum. The crushing is a slow, methodical, terrifying application of absolute force. The pharyngeal teeth grind together with a pressure that defies the structural integrity of calcium carbonate. Inside the throat, the urchin's backup plan fails entirely. The spines that were meant to deter a bite are snapped like dry twigs, safely contained deep within tissues that are evolved to withstand the abrasion. The dense, interlocking plates of the urchin's test, engineered to resist the jaws of the shark, buckle and implode under the sustained, grinding weight of the second jaw. The sound of this internal destruction is a muffled, wet crunching, entirely hidden behind the fish's placid, unreadable face. The Napoleon fish possesses a second set of teeth specifically evolved to break your backup plan. It bypasses the evolutionary arms race of the reef by refusing to participate in a frontal assault. It accepts the prey on its own terms, takes the armor inside, and disassembles in the mechanical dead end where spikes, shells, and toxins are rendered completely irrelevant. The fortress is not penetrated. It is pulverized into digestible sand. The fish manages this internal demolition with surgical care. The pharyngeal jaws cycle, grinding the fragments down, ensuring that no sharp edges remain to perforate the stomach or the intestinal tract. It converts a highly defended, mechanically hostile organism into a safe, nutrient-rich slurry. This ability to process the unprocessable defines the ecological weight of the Napoleon fish. It is a specialist in the prey that everyone else leaves behind. While the rest of the reef predators are competing for the soft, fast, and elusive silver fish darting through the water column, the Napoleon fish operates in a completely monopolized economic niche. It eats the armored tanks of the ocean, and in doing so, it serves as one of the most critical load-bearing pillars of the entire reef ecosystem. Sea urchins, crown-of-thorns starfish, and large, heavily armored crabs are voracious consumers. Left unchecked, populations of these hard-shelled grazers will explode. A localized explosion of sea urchins can strip a reef of its essential algae, scraping the limestone bare and destabilizing the delicate balance between the coral polyps and the plant life. An outbreak of the toxic, heavily spined crown-of-thorns starfish can literally devour a coral reef alive, leaving nothing behind but bleached, dead skeletons. Most predators cannot stop these outbreaks because they physically cannot bypass the venom and the spines. The Napoleon fish can, by casually strolling through the reef and crushing these heavily fortified grazers into dust. The wrasse acts as the immune system of the coral ecosystem. It culls the species that would otherwise consume the foundation of the habitat. The Napoleon fish does not hunt to save the reef. It hunts to fuel its massive body, but its unique internal machinery inadvertently engineers the survival of thousands of other species. Fear does not reorganize the reef here. The pharyngeal jaw does. But wielding this kind of power requires a very specific biological temperament. The Napoleon fish is not a mindless vacuum. It is deeply, fundamentally observant. Those thick, fleshy lips are not just shock absorbers. They are highly sensitive tactile and chemical sensors. As the fish glides over the reef, it frequently taps its lips against the rock, tasting the chemical signatures of the water, feeling the texture of the hidden life beneath the rubble. It continuously evaluates the terrain, running a complex internal cost-benefit analysis. Is this shell too thick? Is this urchin too large to pass through the pharyngeal gap? The intelligence of the Napoleon fish is not the problem-solving intelligence of an octopus, but the measured, calculating intelligence of an energy accountant. It knows exactly what its internal machinery can handle, and it rarely makes a mistake. This measured approach to life extends to its interactions with the rest of the ocean. Because it is so large, and because its armor-crushing capabilities are so absolute, the Napoleon fish fears almost nothing. A mature adult has no natural predators. It moves through the water with the slow, untouchable confidence of an animal that knows it has won the evolutionary lottery. It does not need to hide in the shadows. It sleeps openly in large caves, trusting its sheer bulk to deter harassment. But this absolute dominance carries a tragic, fatal flaw. The traits that make the Napoleon fish a masterpiece of evolution, its immense size, its slow, unbothered nature, its long lifespan, and predictable habits, make it uniquely vulnerable to the one predator that does not play by the rules of biology. The Napoleon fish is a slow-motion animal in a fast-forward world. It takes years, sometimes up to nearly a decade, for an individual to reach sexual maturity. They can live for over 30 years, accumulating mass, learning the exact topography of their massive home ranges, serving as the localized wardens of the reef. They are not a species built for rapid replacement. Every single adult represents a massive investment of evolutionary time and ecological stability. When a human diver drops into the water with a spear gun, or a fishing boat drops a cyanide line into the reef, the Napoleon fish does not flee. It has spent millions of years evolving to be the biggest, most untouchable presence in the sunlit shallows. It trusts its eyes. It often swims directly toward divers, its highly developed eyes tracking the new, strange shapes with calm, calculating curiosity. It does not understand that a spear ignores the heavy scales, or that cyanide paralyzes a pharyngeal engine. When a mature Napoleon fish is extracted from the reef, it does not just leave an empty space in the water. It leaves a massive, gaping hole in the structural integrity of the ecosystem. Because they reproduce so slowly, the local population cannot simply spawn a replacement. The localized warden is gone, and in the absence of the crusher, the armored grazers begin to march. The urchins multiply. The toxic starfish spread. The balance of the reef tilts, slowly at first, and then with devastating acceleration, toward collapse. The removal of the single, slow-moving fish can cascade to the food web, altering the health of the coral, the distribution of the algae, and the survival of species that never even interacted with the wrasse directly. As the encounter on the reef concludes, the Napoleon fish finishes its internal work. The rhythmic flexing of its domed forehead ceases. The urchin has been reduced to biological sand and sent onward to the stomach. The fish adjusts its buoyancy, its pectoral fins resuming their slow, hypnotic sweep. It exhales a faint cloud of crushed calcium carbonate through its gills, a fine, white dust drifting down to settle on the coral, the only external evidence that a violent execution just took place. It continues its patrol, moving out of the shallow basin and along the edge of the drop-off, its electric blues and greens shimmering in the shaft of sunlight. Smaller fish once again part before it. Instinctively recognizing the passage of something vast and heavy, there is profound, chilling beauty in watching Napoleon fish operate. It forces us to confront the reality that nature's most effective weapons are not always the ones put on display. Evolution is not just about the sharpness of the tooth. It is about the architecture of the follow-through. When the prey evolved an impenetrable shield, the predator did not bother sharpening its knife. It simply built a better crushing mill and hid behind a face of absolute, unbothered calm. In the sunlit amphitheater of the reef, the Napoleon fish remains the ultimate, quiet authority, a reminder that the most decisive violence in the world is the violence you never see until it's far, far too late. The limestone wall of the reef is a graveyard of good intentions. It looks like a chaotic lattice of collapsed architecture, a vertical maze of fissures, dead ends, and shadow corridors. To the casual observer, it is a fortress of hiding places carved by the slow erosion of the tides. But this is not empty space. It is fiercely contested real estate. Every crack in the rock is a negotiation between predator and prey, a space defined by whoever survived long enough to claim it. Deep within one of these narrow fissures, a crab has backed itself against a stone. It is perfectly adapted for a world of blunt force. Its carapace is a rigid vault of calcified armor. Its claws are heavy, serrated shears. When threatened, it locks its joints, extends its defensive spines, and wedges its shell against the unyielding rock. It is executing a biological protocol, refined over millions of years, to defeat the crushing jaws of grouper or the tearing bite of an eel. It is prepared for a fight defined by compression and impact. But the predator coming for the crab does not use impact. It does not bite the armor. It does not even possess a single bone in its entire body. The octopus does not approach its target. It arrives by dissolving into the terrain. It flows across the reef, a liquid entity pouring over the jagged coral. Its skin shifts in color, texture, and pattern from one second to the next, reading the visual data of the rock and replicating it with flawless, instant precision. It does not look like an animal on the move. It looks like a piece of the reef that has suddenly decided to detach and slide upward. It moves with an unsettling, silent fluidity. The arms lead the way, moving independently, mapping the geometry of the rock with delicate, exploratory touches. They are not just feeling the stone, they are tasting it. The undersides of the arms are lined with thousands of chemical receptors, picking up the invisible, lingering scent trails of passing crustaceans. The eyes, highly complex and eerily focused, remain steady. They are not looking for crab itself. They are scanning the reef for what is missing. They are looking for a hole with scuffed edges, a crevice swept clean of debris, a shadow that suggests occupancy. When the octopus finds a fissure, it does not launch an assault. It commits to the space. One arm threads into the darkness, slipping into the narrow gap between the crab and the stone. Then a second arm follows, bending and twisting at angles that defy the logic of jointed limbs. Then a third. The crab reacts instantly. It braces harder. It pushes its armor back against the limestone, presenting only its heavy claws to the encroaching threat. But the defense is meaningless. There is no single point of attack for the crab to fend off. The octopus is not pulling. It is surrounding. This is the great misunderstanding of the octopus. We are told stories of its profound intelligence, its ability to solve puzzles and unscrew jars, and we mistakenly frame this intellect as a compensation for physical weakness. We view the octopus as a soft, vulnerable genius force to outsmart a world of heavily armored brutes. That framing collapses the moment you see a hunt. The softness is not a vulnerability. It is the ultimate weapon. Each of those 8 arms is a muscular hydrostat, a complex matrix of longitudinal, transverse, and circular muscles that function entirely without skeletal support, much like the human tongue or an elephant's trunk. They are capable of exerting immense, sustained force. As the arms snake around the crab, the suction cups engage. They do not grab randomly. They activate in a coordinated, sequential sequence, turning the soft flesh of the arm into a living, unbreakable clamp. The octopus exerts torque, twisting and locking the crab into place, using the walls of the crab's own chosen fortress as a vice. The crab is pinned not by one overpowering grip, but by a sprawling network of grips working in terrifying harmony. The octopus slowly shifts its mass outside the hole, applying just enough leverage to peel the crab slightly away from the stone, exposing the vulnerable underside. Armor is a calculation. It is thickest where the animal expects to be hit. The top of the carapace is built to survive a hammer blow, but underneath, where the legs articulate, where the body must remain flexible to allow for movement, the defenses thin out into soft joints and overlapping plates. The octopus does not need to shatter the vault. It simply needs to find the seam. Hidden at the dead center of the swirling arms is the only rigid structure in the octopus's entire body. It is the beak, made of hardened chitin. It looks remarkably like the beak of a parrot, sharp, curved, and surgically precise. It is completely hidden from the outside world until the exact moment it is required. The arms maneuver the crab, presenting the soft articulation of the underside directly to the mouth. The beak extends and makes a single, devastatingly precise incision. It does not crush. It shears to the connective tissue, bypassing the armor completely. But the bite is only the delivery mechanism. With the incision comes the chemistry. As the beak slices into crab, the octopus introduces a highly specialized, paralyzing venom from its salivary glands. This is not an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate expression of energy accounting. In a confined space, a panicked, thrashing crab could wedge itself tighter into the rock, snap an eye, or severely damage the delicate tissue of the octopus's arms. A prolonged struggle wastes calories and creates noise that might attract larger predators. The venom intercepts the nervous system of the crab, shutting down neuromuscular function. The thrashing stops. The claws fall limp. The struggle ends almost before it begins. The prey is perfectly immobilized, allowing the octopus to complete the extraction without burning another unnecessary calorie. This is the failure of the rigid defense. The crab shell evolved to resist a predator that operates on expected terms, a predator that bites from the top or crushes from the side. It is completely unprepared for a predator that understands mechanical leverage, identifies architectural weak points, and utilizes chemical shortcuts. The octopus defeats the crab by refusing to play the game the crab practiced for. Once the venom takes hold, the octopus extracts its meal. It does not rush. It re-anchors its suction cups, adjusting its grip, smoothly sliding the paralyzed crab out of the fissure. It handles the prey with a quiet, methodical care that borders on craftsmanship. It carries the meal back to its own den, where the feeding process is executed with the same terrifying precision. It uses the beak to unpick the shell, peeling back sections of the carapace to access the nutrient-rich meat inside without shattering the structure into a mess of wasted fragments. When it is finished, the empty shell is pushed out of the den. It looks almost entirely intact, a pristine piece of armor cleanly hollowed out by a mind that simply unraveled its geometry. To understand how the octopus achieves this level of spatial dominance, you have to look at the architecture of its nervous system. If a human wants to pick up an object, the central brain sends a command down the spinal cord, directing the arm, the hand, and the fingers. It is a top-down hierarchy. The octopus operates on an entirely different plane of existence. More than half of the octopus's neurons are not located in its central brain. They are distributed throughout the 8 arms. Each arm is essentially a semi-independent nervous system, capable of processing sensory input and making localized decisions without consulting the central brain. When the octopus was threading its arms into the dark crevice to find a crab, the central brain was not micromanaging every single suction cup. It gave a generalized command to hunt. The arms did the rest. An arm exploring the rock feels the texture, tastes the chemical signature of the crab, calculates the resistance of the shell, and shifts its grip. All on its own. The octopus is the ultimate distributed network. It is a biological supercomputer processing thousands of localized calculations simultaneously. While one arm explores a fissure, another is securing an anchor point on the rock. A third is altering the camouflage pattern of the skin, and a fourth is preparing to extract the prey. This parallel processing allows the animal to overwhelm its environment. It presents no single point of attack. It operates as a fluid, adapting, problem-solving field that wraps around a problem and solves it in 3 dimensions at once. And all of this profound intelligence, all of this complex venom chemistry and neuromuscular engineering operates under the shadow of a ticking clock. Despite its brilliance, the octopus is a tragically short-lived creature. Most species live only 1 to 2 years. They grow at an explosive rate, their metabolism burning hot and fast. There is no time for a childhood. There is no time to accumulate decades of wisdom or be taught by elders. An octopus is born entirely alone, no larger than a grain of rice, and must immediately begin decoding the deadly mechanics of the ocean. It learns fast because the alternative is death. It maps its world, solves the armor of its prey, and masters the art of invisibility because urgency is hardwired into its cells. Reproduction is terminal. When an octopus mates, it initiates a biological countdown. The female will lay her eggs, guard them with obsessive devotion, slowly starving to death as she blows water over them to keep them oxygenated. By the time they hatch, she is dead. The brilliance of the octopus is a temporary spark, a fleeting burst of genius that burns brightly and extinguishes quickly. Every hunt, every puzzle solved, every crab dismantled is executed with the ruthless efficiency of a creature that knows it has absolutely no time to waste. Back on the reef, the meal is over. The octopus cleans the area outside its den, ensuring no bright white shell fragments remain to betray its position to passing eels or sharks. It sweeps the stone. Then it melts back into the shadows. The skin stipples, raising tiny papillae to mimic the texture of the coral. The color shifts into a mottled brown and green. Within seconds, the most intelligent invertebrate on the planet ceases to exist visually. The space resets. The empty crevice waits for the next crab to wander in, heavily armored, confident in its hardened shell, completely unaware that in this ecosystem, rigidity is a liability. The reef continues its slow, violent turn. The lesson left behind in the shadows is absolute. Survival does not belong to the animal that builds the thickest walls. It belongs to the mind that can turn itself into whatever the moment requires. A rope, a wedge, a chemical syringe, a phantom. The octopus proves that the ultimate defense and the ultimate weapon is a total absence of a fixed form. Before we dive deeper into the shadows to uncover our next creature, make sure to subscribe to Marine Documentary so you never miss a descent into the wild. The tidal zone is a harsh, unforgiving boundary where the ocean violently negotiates its borders with the land. Everything that lives here must endure the crushing weight of breaking waves, the receding tides that leave them exposed to the baking sun, and the constant, prowling presence of predators. To survive in this environment, many organisms have adopted a philosophy of absolute, unyielding denial. They do not run. They do not fight. They build a vault. They lock themselves inside, and they wait for the danger to pass. Look at a mussel bed clinging to the rocks. It is a dense, black metropolis of heavily armored bivalves. When a threat approaches, or when the water recedes, the mussel activates a massive, specialized organ called the adductor muscle. This muscle snaps the two halves of the calcium carbonate shell together with incredible force, sealing the soft, vulnerable organism inside a watertight, airtight, practically impenetrable fortress. Against the jaws of a fish, the pecking beak of a bird, or the crushing claws of a crab, this strategy is mathematically sound. The predator expends energy trying to pry the shell open, fails, becomes exhausted, and leaves. The mussel trades mobility for the guarantee that it can outwait the apocalypse. But drifting across a rock, moving at a pace that barely registers as motion, comes a predator that operates on a completely different temporal axis. It is a predator that does not care how thick the walls are, and it certainly does not care how long it takes to breach them. The starfish does not look like a threat. It possesses no head, no face, no jaws, and no centralized brain. Its body plan is radially symmetrical, a central disc sprouting 5 or more arms, looking more like a piece of decorative geometry than a biological weapon. It lacks the streamlined musculature of a hunter. When it passes over the rocks, the fish do not scatter. The crabs do not raise their claws. It commands no fear because it moves with sluggish, almost hypnotic crawl that betrays zero predatory intent. But this perceived sluggishness is a fatal illusion. The starfish is not slow because it is primitive. It is slow because it is preparing to execute a siege. When the starfish encounters a mussel bed, it does not launch an attack. It drapes itself over a chosen victim. The arms wrap around the two halves of the bivalve shell, settling over the curved dome of the armor. To the mussel, This contact triggers the standard protocol. The adductor muscle fires. The shell clamps completely shut. The fortress is locked. The muscle prepares to wait out the predator. This is the fundamental mismatch of the encounter. The muscle is playing a game of time, assuming the predator will eventually lose patience or burn through its energy reserves and abandon the effort. The starfish, however, is a creature that essentially owns time. Beneath the arms of the starfish, on its underside, are thousands of tiny, highly specialized appendages called tube feet. They are no larger than grains of rice, each ending in a microscopic suction cup. As the starfish drapes over the shell, these tube feet extend. They grope blindly along the smooth surface of the calcium carbonate, finding perches, gripping the armor with terrifying intimacy. Once the tube feet are anchored, the starfish begins to pull. It does not yank. It does not exert a sudden, violent burst of strength to crack the shell. It simply applies a steady, opposing pressure against the muscle's locked adductor muscle. To understand why this is so devastating, you must look at the biomechanics of the two combatants. The muscle relies on a biological, chemical engine. Its adductor muscle, like human muscles, burns cellular energy, ATP, to maintain its contraction. As it holds the shell closed against the pulling force of the starfish, it rapidly consumes its metabolic fuel. Lactic acid builds up. The tissue begins to experience biochemical fatigue. The muscle is straining, burning its reserves, screaming biologically to hold the doors shut. The starfish is not using muscles to pull. It is using hydraulics. The tube feet are powered by a water vascular system, a marvel of engineering completely unique to echinoderms. The starfish pulls seawater into its body through a sieve-like plate on its back, channeling that water through a ring canal and pushing it out into the radial canals running down each arm. This water is pumped into tiny, muscular bulbs above each tube foot called ampullae. When the starfish wants to apply force, it squeezes the ampullae, driving water into the tube foot, extending it. When the foot touches the shell, the center of the suction cup retracts, creating a vacuum seal. Then, the starfish simply locks the hydraulic valves in its water vascular system. Because the force is maintained by fluid pressure trapped behind closed biological valves, the starfish requires almost zero metabolic energy to keep pulling. It is not burning ATP to maintain the tension. It is just relying on the incompressible physics of water. It can hold this pulling force for hours, even days, without breaking a sweat, without feeling fatigue, without requiring a break. The siege is invisible, completely silent, and mathematically inevitable. The starfish pits the tireless, infinite patience of water pressure against the finite, rapidly depleting chemical energy of the muscle's flesh. Hours pass. The surrounding ocean surges and recedes. The starfish remains perfectly still, a silent star wrapped around a black stone. Deep inside the shell, the muscle begins to fail. The adductor muscle is trembling. The ATP stores are exhausted. The biochemical locks holding the tissue together begin to slip. The muscle cannot sustain the maximum contraction any longer. It yields just slightly. The gap that opens between the two halves of the shell is microscopic. It is measured in fractions of a millimeter. To a shark, an eel, or crab, a gap this small is utterly useless. You cannot fit a claw or a tooth into a space thinner than a fingernail. But the starfish does not need to get its mouth inside the shell. It just needs a pathway. What happens next is a profound subversion of biological norms. Most predators follow a strict sequence. You overpower the prey, you bite it, you swallow it, and then you digest it inside your stomach. The starfish shatters this sequence. It skips the swallowing entirely. From the center of the starfish's underside, a specialized organ called the cardiac stomach begins to evert. It literally pushes its own stomach out of its mouth, turning the organ inside out like a fluid, expanding balloon. This incredibly thin, highly flexible membranous sac slides to the microscopic gap forced open by the hydraulic tube feet. The predator does not bring the prey into its body. It sends its digestive system into the prey's fortress. Once the averted stomach slips inside the shell, it envelopes the soft, living tissue of the exhausted muscle. The starfish then pumps concentrated digestive enzymes directly from its internal organs down into the averted stomach sac. These enzymes are violently corrosive. They begin to break down the muscle's cellular structure immediately. The muscle is still alive as this begins. Its armor is still fully intact, still serving as a completely impenetrable wall to the outside world. But the wall has been bypassed. The fortress has been turned into a sealed digestion chamber. The starfish dissolves the prey alive, liquefying proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, turning the highly evolved organism into a nutrient-rich biological soup. Cilia, microscopic, hair-like structures lining the starfish's stomach, beat rhythmically, creating a localized current that channels the liquefied nutrients back out to the gap in the shell and deep into the starfish's body, where it is absorbed by a second internal stomach. This is the ultimate workaround. The starfish never has to exert the force required to shatter the shell. It never has to risk breaking its own teeth. It never has to swallow anything sharp or hard or indigestible. It outsources the violence to its enzymes, using the prey's own defensive vault as a cooking pot. When the digestion is complete, the starfish slowly retracts its stomach, pulling the delicate membrane back through the tiny gap, sliding it back inside its own body. It releases the hydraulic pressure in its tube feet. It unpeels its arms from the shell and slowly crawls away. Left behind is a perfect, pristine muscle shell. There are no bite marks. There are no fractures. The hinge is completely intact. But inside it is hollow. It is swept clean, a ghost town enclosed in armor. To any other creature passing by, it looks like a living muscle, completely unharmed. Only upon touch does the shell fall open, revealing the absolute void left by the slow-motion break-in. Executing a strategy this complex, coordinating thousands of hydraulic feet, monitoring pressure, and everything internal organs, seems like it would require immense processing power. But the starfish possesses no brain. Its entire existence is governed by a decentralized neural network. A single nerve ring circles its mouth, with radial nerves branching down the center of each arm. There is no central commander making executive decisions. The intelligence of the starfish is distributed evenly across its entire body. When an arm touches a food source, the chemical sensors on the tube feet trigger a localized response. That arm begins to move, pulling the rest of the body with it. The other arms sense the movement and join in, aligning their tube feet to assist. The stomach aversion is an automatic reflex triggered by the sensory input of the microscopic gap opening. The starfish operates as a collective colony of reflexes, a biological automaton executing a flawless, algorithmic hunting sequence without ever forming a single conscious thought. This decentralized architecture makes the starfish incredibly resilient. If a predator like a crab or a bird attacks the starfish while it is feeding, attempting to bite off an arm, the starfish does not panic. Panic requires a brain. It simply triggers a specialized biological failsafe at the base of the injured limb. The connective tissue liquefies, the arm detaches entirely, and the starfish crawls away, leaving the severed limb behind as a distraction. Because the vital organs, the digestive glands, the reproductive systems, and the neural network are duplicated and extended into every single arm, the loss is merely an inconvenience. Within weeks, the stump heals and a new arm begins to bud, growing back to full size. In some species, if that severed arm retains even a small fraction of a central nerve ring, it will not die. It will heal its wound and slowly regenerate for entirely new arms, eventually becoming a complete, genetically identical starfish. This extreme regenerative capability is the perfect complement to a life spent moving at a crawl. When you cannot run from damage, you must be able to absorb it, discard it, and rebuild. The slow, silent slaughter of the bivalves has profound ecological consequences. The starfish is not a selective eater. It is a relentless consumer of space. Mussel beds, left to their own devices, will aggressively expand, dominating the rocky coastline, pushing out kelp, barnacles, and other organisms, creating a monoculture. By slowly moving along the rock face, prying open shells and hollowing out the inhabitants, the starfish functions as an ecological bulldozer. It clears premium real estate on the crowded rocks. The empty shells wash away or break apart, exposing bare stone. Algae spores settle on this freshly cleared canvas. Snails move in to graze on the algae. Crabs arrive to hunt the snails. By simply eating, the starfish single-handedly prevents the mussels from monopolizing the coastline, forcing biodiversity into the ecosystem. It is a keystone predator, a slow-moving architect that dictates the shape of the entire tidal community through the relentless application of hydraulic pressure. Its behavior is deeply tied to the temperature of the water. As an ectotherm, the starfish's metabolism is completely dictated by the thermal energy of the ocean. In the warm summer months, its internal chemistry accelerates. The hydraulic pumps work faster. The digestive enzymes become hyperactive. The siege times shorten, and the starfish cuts a swath of destruction through bivalve colonies. But when the water cools, the machinery slows down. The aversion of the stomach takes longer. The digestion creeps. The starfish becomes a lethargic shadow of itself, waiting for the ambient heat of the ocean to throttle its engine back up. This thermal dependency locks the starfish into the rhythmic cycles of the planet. It is an animal entirely surrendered to the physical laws of its environment. It does not fight the cold. It slows with it. It does not fight the armor. It outlasts it. It does not fight the loss of a limb. It regrows it. Watch it as it moves away from the empty shell, arms gliding over the jagged stone. It looks harmless. It looks like a silent, decorative star fallen to the ocean floor. But beneath that slow, radial geometry lies one of the most terrifyingly effective problem-solving machines ever evolved. It teaches a chilling lesson about the nature of conflict. Survival does not always go to the fastest, the strongest, or the most heavily armored. Sometimes, the ultimate victor is the one who refuses to play by the established rules of physics and biomechanics. The starfish does not crash against the walls of the fortress. It simply grabs hold, applies the infinite patience of the ocean itself, and waits for the biology of its prey to break under the weight of time. And when the microscopic crack appears, it proves that the most devastating way to destroy a heavily fortified enemy is to simply digest them from the inside out. The boundary where the jagged vertical architecture of the coral reef gives way to the flat, pale expanse of the sandy seafloor is a zone of high anxiety. It is an edge habitat, a transitional space where the rules of the environment abruptly change. Small fish venture out over the sand to graze on drifting plankton or pick at the sediment, but they do so with nervous, twitching energy. They know they are exposed. They know that out here, there are no crevices to duck into, no coral branches to put between themselves and the teeth of the pelagic hunters. Their entire survival strategy out over the sand is predicated on a single assumption: speed. If a predator appears, they believe they can see it coming, calculate the distance, and rely on explosive, fast-twitch muscle fibers in their tails to propel them back to the safety of the reef before the jaws close. They trust their reflexes. They trust their agility. But hiding in the shadows at the base of the reef, blending flawlessly into the mottled background of algae and stone, is a predator that renders agility completely mathematically irrelevant. A massive grouper rests on the bottom. It is a hulking, heavy-bodied fish, sometimes weighing hundreds of pounds, colored in muted browns, greens, and grays that dissolve its silhouette into surrounding rubble. It does not look like a hunter. Its posture is profoundly lethargic. It is angled slightly upward, its heavy pectoral fins propping off the sand. Its thick lips are closed, its gill covers flaring softly, rhythmically, with the slow, unbothered respiration of an animal that is half asleep. To the darting, hyper-alert prey fish hovering a few feet away, the grouper barely registers as a threat. It looks too heavy, too sluggish, too fundamentally unsuited for a high-speed chase. And the prey is correct. The grouper is not built for a high-speed chase. It has absolutely no intention of chasing anything. The grouper does not overcome distance by swimming across it. It overcomes distance by commanding the water itself to bring the prey to its mouth. As the small fish drifts just an inch too close, crossing an invisible, calculated radius, the grouper executes a biomechanical maneuver that defies the eye. There is no wind-up. There is no lunge forward. There is no snapping of jaws in the traditional sense. Instead, the fish simply opens its mouth, and the world collapses inward. A sudden, violent plume of sand lifts from the seafloor. The water in front of the grouper visibly distorts, rushing backward into the cavernous mauled predator. The small fish, mid-beat of its tail, completely prepared to sprint toward the reef, does not even have the chance to turn. It is not outrun. It is not outmaneuvered. It simply vanishes, deleted from the water column a fraction of a second, pulled past the heavy lips and swallowed whole. The mouth snaps shut. The gills vent a sudden exhaust to displace water and sand. The grouper settles back into its lethargic, unmoving posture. The entire event is over in less than 40 milliseconds, faster than the human brain can process the visual data. To understand what just happened, you must look at the skull of the grouper not as a set of jaws, but as a complex, hyper-engineered kinematic linkage. It is a biological vacuum chamber. When a predator like a shark bites, it moves its teeth through the water to strike the prey. But moving your head forward through water pushes a pressure wave ahead of you. It literally pushes the prey away. Suction feeding solves this problem by reversing the flow. When the grouper decides to strike, a complex series of bones in its skull rotate simultaneously. The lower jaw drops drastically. At the exact same microsecond, the bones on the sides of the head, the suspensorium, flare outward, widening the mouth laterally. The floor of the throat drops downward, and crucially, the heavy gill covers snap tightly shut, sealing the back of the chamber. In the span of a few milliseconds, the internal volume of the grouper's mouth and throat increases by a staggering percentage. Physics dictates a universal law. When volume suddenly increases within a sealed chamber, pressure must instantly drop. The grouper creates a localized, extreme low-pressure void, a near vacuum, inside its own head. Nature abhors a vacuum. The surrounding ocean, under the crushing weight of the atmosphere in its own depth, rushes in to fill that void with catastrophic speed. The water immediately in front of the grouper accelerates exponentially, forming a three-dimensional, cone-shaped vortex of incoming flow. And anything caught within that cone, sand, loose debris, and living prey, is subjected to a sheer hydrodynamic drag that vastly exceeds the swimming power of any fish. This is why the agility of the prey is irrelevant. You can have the fastest reflexes in the ocean, you can have muscles designed for explosive sprinting, but if the actual medium you are swimming in, the water itself, is moving backward at 20 miles per hour, you're going backward with it. The prey is not defeated by the predator's muscles. It is defeated by the localized collapse of its own environment. The water betrays it. But the grouper is not just relying on the raw power of its skull. It is a master of spatial geometry. If a fish attempts to suction feed in the middle of the open water column, water rushes into its mouth from all directions, from above, below, the left, the right, and straight ahead. This forms a spherical pressure gradient. While effective, drawing water from all sides dilutes the pulling force in any one specific direction. The grouper knows how to concentrate the force. This is why it hunts on bottom, or back tightly into a cave, or wedged beneath a rocky overhang. By placing its belly flat against the sand, the grouper eliminates the possibility of water flowing in from below. The sand acts as a physical barrier. The suction cone can no longer form a sphere. It is forced into a half sphere, doubling the velocity and pulling power of the water coming from above and in front. When a grouper hunts from inside a cave, the effect is magnified even further. The rock walls channel the incoming water, preventing lateral flow. The entire volume of the cavern becomes a weaponized funnel, focusing the totality of the pressure gradient directly out the entrance. The grouper turns geology into an extension of its own throat. This strategy requires an immense amount of patience and a deep, intimate knowledge of the local topography. Groupers are fiercely territorial. A large adult will claim a specific section of the reef, prioritizing access to the best caves, the deepest ledges, and the most structurally advantageous ambush points. They do not just live in these holes. They monopolize them. Because they rely on ambush and suction, they are incredibly energy efficient. Swimming burns calories. Chasing burns calories. The grouper conserves its energy by remaining completely still, slowing its heart rate, and waiting for the geometry of the reef and the shifting tides to bring the calories to the front door. They time their feeding to the rhythmic patterns of the ocean. During tidal shifts, when currents sweep small fish closer to the structure for shelter, or during the twilight hours of dawn and dusk when visual acuity is compromised, the grouper becomes hypersensitive. The sensory biology supporting this ambush is perfectly tuned. The lateral line running down the grouper's massive flanks detects the faintest vibrations in the water column. Its eyes, positioned high and forward, track silhouettes against the ambient light. It does not need to see the prey clearly. It only needs to know that a solid mass has entered the event horizon of the suction cone. The ecological impact of a massive territorial suction feeder is profound. The grouper is a heavy, dominating anchor in the reef's food web. By claiming the best structural hideouts, it displaces other, smaller predators, forcing them out into riskier territories. Its sheer presence acts as a deterrent. Small fish learn the boundaries of the grouper's zone. They alter their foraging paths, avoiding the dark overhangs and the specific patches of sand that fall within the kill radius. By altering where small herbivorous fish feel safe enough to graze, the grouper indirectly controls the distribution of algae on the reef. It shapes the landscape through projection of an invisible threat. But within the zone of absolute dominance, there exists a bizarre, delicate, and entirely contradictory truce. Occasionally, the massive grouper will leave its cave and swim to a specific, prominent coral head known as a cleaning station. It will hover in the water column, angle its body upward, flare its gills completely open, and open its cavernous mouth. From the coral, tiny, brightly colored cleaner wrasses dart outward. These fish are a fraction of the size of the grouper's normal prey. They swim directly into the strike zone. They swim past the heavy lips, past the crushing teeth, and venture deep into the dark, lethal chamber of the mouth itself. They pick dead skin, parasites, and food debris from the grouper's gums, its throat, and the delicate, blood-red filaments of its gills. For the grouper, executing a suction strike right now would require nothing more than a millisecond twitch of its jaw muscles. It could delete the cleaner wrasses instantly, but it doesn't. The grouper suppresses millions of years of predatory instinct because the mathematical return of hygiene outweighs the caloric value of a tiny fish. Parasites drain energy, cause infections, and degrade the hydrodynamic efficiency of the skin. The cleaner wrasses provide a necessary medical service. So, the apex predator holds its mouth open, remaining perfectly, terrifyingly still, allowing the tiny fish to dance over the trigger of the most devastating trap on the reef. When the cleaning is done, the grouper gives a subtle, universal signal, a sharp shuddering of its body or a specific closing of its gills, warning the wrasses to evacuate. The tiny fish dart away. The truce ends. The grouper resets its jaw, turns its heavy body, and descends back toward its chosen cavern in the shadows. It settles into the dust. The camouflage takes over. The browns and grays of its skin melt into the limestone and the shadows. The gills resume their slow, sleepy rhythm. To a diver or a passing turtle, the scene looks entirely peaceful. The reef is just a beautiful, static structure of coral and sand. But that peace is a biological lie. The water directly in front of the cave is not empty space. It is a loaded weapon. It is a volume of ocean just waiting for command to collapse inward. The grouper teaches us that in the ocean, true dominance is not about the speed at which you can move through the environment. True dominance is the ability to force the environment to move for you. It sits in the dark, breathing slowly, a master phase change in pressure, proving again and again that if you can control the physics of the water, you never need to chase anything ever again. In the theater of the ocean, movement is the primary currency of survival. The entire ecosystem is built on a kinetic economy. If you are prey, you move to escape the jaws. If you are a predator, you move to close the distance. Speed is life. Agility is insurance. Even the animals that rely on camouflage, the octopus flowing across the coral, the cuttlefish flickering in the light, use their invisibility as a precursor to action. They hide so they can eventually strike, or they hide so they can eventually flee. But if you descend to the absolute bottom of the reef, down with spectacular architecture, the living coral crumbles into a graveyard of broken limestone, dead shells, and settling silt. You'll find an animal that has opted out of this kinetic economy entirely. It does not flee. It does not chase. It has abandoned the very concept of movement as a survival strategy, replacing it with a philosophy of absolute, venomous apathy. You will not see it, even if you're staring directly at it. The stonefish does not wear camouflage in the traditional sense. It does not change its colors to match a background. It does something far more profound. It physically becomes a background. Its body is a masterpiece of architectural decay. The skin is devoid of the sleek, hydrodynamic scales that define almost every other fish in the sea. Instead, it is heavily textured, covered in irregular, wart-like protrusions, jagged ridges, and fleshy flaps that perfectly mimic the chaotic, broken geometry of coral rubble. It does not actively clean itself. It allows the ocean to claim it. Algae takes root and grows across its back. Microscopic marine organisms settle into the crevices of its skin. Silt and sand drift down from the currents and coat its flanks. It embraces the detritus of the sea, wearing the actual environment like a ghillie suit. It has surrendered the sleek, elegant form of a fish to become a lump of calcified rock. Its body plan reflects this total commitment to stillness. The stonefish is heavy, dense, and negatively buoyant. It does not float effortlessly in the water column. It sinks like a lead weight, pressing its flattened belly firmly against the substrate. Its pectoral fins are broad and rounded, completely useless for sustained swimming, serving only as awkward, fleshy crutches to periodically drag its heavy mass a few inches across the sand. Even its eyes have migrated. They sit high on the very top of its skull, permanently staring upward into the blue, watching the world move by while the rest of its body remains buried in the noise of the reef floor. This absolute immobility presents a massive biological problem. The reef floor is a bustling, high-traffic thoroughfare. Crabs scuttle across the rocks. Moray eels slither blindly through the rubble, hunting by smell. Massive groupers and nurse sharks cruise inches above the sand, looking for anything edible. If you are going to sit perfectly still in the middle of a crowded, predator-rich highway, you cannot simply hope that you go unnoticed. Eventually, the math of the ocean dictates that someone or something is going to step on you. And that is exactly what the stonefish is counting on. It does not hide to avoid contact. It hides to guarantee it. Running along the dorsal ridge of the stonefish's back, perfectly disguised among the algae-covered lumps of its skin, is a row of 13 heavy hypodermic spines. These are not flexible fins. They are hardened, needle-sharp biological bayonets, each one resting upright, pointed directly toward the surface. At the base of every single spine lies a pair of specialized venom glands, heavily loaded with one of the most complex and devastating neurotoxic cocktails found anywhere in the natural world. The glands are wrapped in a sheath of skin. When a threat approaches, when the shadow of a shark passes over, or the probing tentacles of an octopus reach out, the stonefish does not flinch. It does not display a warning. The lionfish flares its fins to announce its toxicity. The rattlesnake shakes its tail. The stonefish offers no such courtesy. A warning implies a negotiation. The stonefish does not negotiate. The predator, completely unaware that the rock beneath it is alive, misjudges its clearance. A fin brushes the bottom. A jaw lowers to inspect the smell. A heavy body settles onto the sand to rest. The moment weight is applied to the back of the stonefish, the trap is sprung. But the stonefish does not actively strike. It does not flex a muscle or whip a tail. It outsources the delivery of its weapon entirely to the laws of physics. As the predator presses down, the hardened spines easily pierce the attacker's flesh, sliding through scales, skin, and cartilage. The downward pressure of the attacker's own body weight compresses the skin sheaths at the base of the spines. This compression squeezes the venom glands like a plunger in a syringe, forcing the highly pressurized liquid up through deep grooves running along the sides of the spines, directly deep into the newly opened wounds. The predator injects itself. The harder it steps, the deeper the needles go, and the more venom is pumped into its bloodstream. It is a flawless mechanical delivery system powered entirely by the kinetic energy of the victim. And the venom itself is an absolute masterpiece of biological cruelty. It is a complex amalgam of proteins, including a specialized enzyme called stonistoxin. This chemical is not designed to slowly shut down organs, nor is it primarily designed to be lethal, although in sufficient doses. It certainly can be. Its primary evolutionary purpose is the instantaneous delivery of mind-shattering, all-consuming agony. Pain is the ocean's ultimate behavioral modifier. If the venom simply killed the predator instantly, the heavy, dead carcass would collapse directly on top of the stonefish, pinning it to the sea floor, suffocating it, or attracting scavengers that would tear the stonefish apart in their frenzy to eat the dead predator. The stonefish does not want a corpse on its back. It wants the airspace cleared immediately. When the stonistoxin hits the predator's nervous system, it triggers an explosion of pain receptors. The sensation is often described by human victims as the feeling of a limb being struck by a sledgehammer, doused in battery acid and set on fire all simultaneously. It causes immediate, violent swelling. It disrupts the cardiovascular system, sending the victim into deep physiological shock. It causes temporary paralysis and extreme muscle spasms. The response from the predator is immediate and violent. The sheer intensity of the shock overrides every other biological imperative. The shark or the eel or the ray recoils with explosive force, thrashing wildly to get away from the source of the trauma. It aborts the hunt. It abandons the territory. It flees in blind, uncoordinated panic, its nervous system completely hijacked by the chemical fire burning through its veins. The encounter is over in a fraction of a second. And through it all, the stonefish has not moved a single millimeter. It has not expended a single calorie of energy in a physical fight. It simply sat there, held its ground, and let the geometry of its spines and the chemistry of its glands do the work. The trap resets itself automatically. The venom glands will slowly begin to synthesize a new payload. The algae will continue to grow. The fish remains a rock. This strategy of passive, venomous deterrence is incredibly effective, but it requires an absolute, unwavering commitment to the bit. The stonefish is a prisoner of its own perfection, because it has sacrificed hydrodynamics, speed, and agility to become a heavily armed landmine. It cannot hunt like a normal fish. It cannot pursue prey. It must wait for its food to come to it. When a small fish or a shrimp wanders too close to its mouth, completely fooled by the camouflage, the stonefish employs a rapid suction strike, opening its cavernous jaws and inhaling the prey in a split second. But if the prey stays just an inch outside that strike zone, the stonefish will not chase it. It will sit and starve before it breaks its cover. Furthermore, this lifestyle makes the stonefish intensely vulnerable to the shifting physical parameters of the ocean. If a heavy storm surges through the reef, altering the topography, washing away the rubble, and leaving the stonefish exposed on a stretch of flat, white sand, its camouflage fails completely. On bare sand, it is just a dark, lumpy, slow-moving target. It must painstakingly, awkwardly drag its heavy body, using its pectoral crutches to find a new patch of debris, entirely exposed to pelagic predators above until it can blend in again. Its entire existence is a high-stakes gamble on remaining invisible. It relies on the absolute certainty that if the invisibility fails, the venom will not. The ecological footprint of the stonefish is invisible, but it is profound. It dictates the spatial awareness of everything that lives near the reef floor. Experienced predators, the ones that have survived a glancing encounter with a dorsal spine, carry that trauma with them. They alter their behavior. They approach the rubble zones with extreme caution. They hover just a few inches higher. They avoid resting blindly on the bottom. Without actively patrolling, without making a sound, the stonefish enforces a strict zone of caution across the substrate. It dictates the traffic patterns of the reef simply through the threat of consequence. It forces us to redefine what a predator looks like. We are accustomed to nature being a contest of action, the fastest runner, the hardest biter, the strongest swimmer. But the stonefish proves that there's immense, terrifying power in the absolute refusal to act. It does not need to be faster or stronger. It only needs to be inevitable. In a world defined by the frantic, endless pursuit of survival, the stonefish has found the ultimate shortcut. It has erased itself from the visual world, wrapped itself in a cocktail of neurotoxic agony, and surrendered itself to the seafloor. It waits in the shadows of the broken coral, a biological landmine armed and ready, offering a quiet, brutal promise to the ocean. Do not touch the ground, because in this corner of the reef, the ground bites back. The sunlight that bathes the upper canopies of the coral reef paints a picture of boundless, open freedom. But as you descend, the light fractures. The vibrant, sprawling gardens of the shallows give way to the foundational architecture of the reef, a dark, claustrophobic labyrinth of eroded limestone, narrow fissures, and shadowed undercuts. This is the underbelly of the ocean. It is a sprawling, vertical slum of dead ends and jagged corridors. Out in the blue water, survival is a matter of speed and streamlined grace. Down here in the alleys, speed is useless. There is no room to accelerate. There is no room to flee. Down here, survival is a brutal, close-quarters brawl. And waiting in the darkest corners of these corridors is the ultimate armored street fighter. A lobster does not patrol the open reef. It understands that to be caught in the open is to invite a death sentence. Instead, it occupies the thresholds. It backs itself deep into a limestone crevice, tucking its vulnerable tail tightly beneath its abdomen, pressing its hardened carapace firmly against the unyielding stone. It essentially fuses its body with the geology of the ocean floor. It sits in the dark, absolutely motionless, but it is not hiding. It is daring the ocean to come down the alley. Long before a predator's eyes can adjust to gloom, the lobster already knows it is there. Protruding from a heavily armored head are two massive, whip-like antennae, stretching out far beyond the reach of the animal's claws. These are not merely decorative feelers. They are an ultra-sensitive, tactile radar network. They sweep the water in continuous, overlapping arcs. They read the microscopic pressure waves generated by displacing water. They taste the chemical signatures of approaching threats. They map the exact distance, speed, and trajectory of anything entering the corridor. The lobster is effectively fighting the dark, but its sensory reach extends far into the danger zone. When a predator, a massive grouper or a prowling reef shark, detects the scent of the lobster and turns into the crevice, it encounters a defensive strategy built entirely on the manipulation of geometry. In the open ocean, a predator has 360 degrees of access to its prey. It can circle, flank, dive, or strike from the blind spot. The lobster, by backing into a narrow cave, systematically eliminates those options. The stone walls neutralize the flanks. The low ceiling neutralizes an attack from above. The predator is forced into a terrifyingly narrow funnel. It has no choice but to approach head-on, walking directly into the kill zone. And waiting in that kill zone is a masterclass in asymmetrical warfare. The lobster raises its claws. They are not a matching pair. Evolution recognized that close-quarters combat requires different tools for different stages of an altercation. So it equipped the lobster with a highly specialized, dual-function armory. One claw is the cutter. It is relatively slim, fast, and lined with jagged, razor-sharp serrations. It is designed for blinding speed and surgical precision. Its purpose is not to kill, but to inflict immediate, shocking pain. It is meant to latch onto a predator's sensitive fins, tear at the soft tissue around the lips, and grip with relentless tenacity. The other claw is a crusher. It is a massive, swollen, blunt-edged club of heavy calcium carbonate, powered by a disproportionately huge mass of muscle. The crusher is incredibly slow, but it possesses a mechanical advantage of a hydraulic press. Its sole purpose is to shatter structural integrity. When the predator pushes its face into the crevice, the lobster does not immediately snap. It lashes out with its thick antennae. These whips strike the predator directly in the eyes, the gills, and the face. They are not lethal blows, but they're profoundly disruptive. Imagine trying to charge into a dark tunnel while thick, rigid cables are violently whipping across your unblinking eyes. It breaks the predator's rhythm. It forces hesitation. It demands that the predator calculate the cost of advancing. If the predator pushes through the agonizing distraction of the antennae, the cutter claw strikes. It moves with blinding speed, clamping onto the sensitive tissues of the attacker's face. The predator thrashes, experiencing a sudden, searing jolt of pain. And while the attacker is distracted by the tearing of the cutter, the massive, slow-moving crusher claw moves into position. If the crusher finds its mark, if it closes around the slender jawbone of a fish or the delicate sensory barbels of a shark, it brings the full, devastating force of its leverage to bear. Bones crack. Cartilage snaps. The predator, realizing that a meal is not worth the permanent loss of its own facial structure, violently backs out of the cave and flees into the blue. The lobster does not pursue. It lowers its claws, resumes its sweep with the antennae, and waits. It won the encounter not by being faster, but by forcing the predator to fight on terms where speed was irrelevant. It turned the environment into an extension of its own armor. The lobster's exoskeleton is a marvel of material science. It is a layered composite of chitin and calcium carbonate, designed to absorb heavy impacts, deflect scraping teeth, and disperse crushing pressure. It allows the lobster to sustain glancing blows that would eviscerate a softer animal. But the lobster knows the ultimate truth of the reef. Armor is only effective if you have leverage. If the lobster is caught out in the open, the entire dynamic collapses. When forced to travel across the exposed sand, the lobster's primary means of escape is a violent, convulsive flapping of its powerful tail. This thrusts the animal rapidly backward through the water column. But this desperate sprint comes with a catastrophic biological cost. Swimming backward entirely exposes a lobster's underbelly, the soft, segmented undercarriage where the armor thins out into fragile joints and delicate swimmerets. In the open water, the lobster is just a heavy, exhausting sprint away from death. It cannot sustain the flight. It will tire, sink, and be torn apart. This is why the lobster is a creature of deep, paranoid nocturnal routine. It moves primarily under the cover of absolute darkness. When the visual hunters of the day are asleep, it does not wander aimlessly. As it navigates the reef, it memorizes a topography. It builds a complex internal map of every overhang, every fissure, every safe harbor within its territory. When it moves from its den to its foraging grounds, it sprints from cover to cover, never exposing itself for longer than absolutely necessary. If danger appears, it does not hesitate. It does not assess. It instantly executes a perfectly memorized retreat back to the nearest defensible hole. But even within the dark, fortified walls of the crevice, the lobster is not invincible. Because while the armor and the claws are designed to defeat the blunt force of a shark or a grouper, they are utterly useless against a predator that refuses to play by the rules of rigid mechanics. When an octopus discovers a lobster's den, it does not charge the front door. It does not offer its face to the crusher claw. It simply flows. The octopus pours its liquid, boneless body into the narrowest margins of the fissure. Its arms slide over the stone, slithering beneath the lobster, reaching around the heavy carapace. The lobster panics. It strikes wildly with the cutter. It brings the crusher down with bone-snapping force. But striking an octopus is like trying to crush water. The octopus does not care if the lobster latches onto one of its arms. It will happily sacrifice a limb it can easily regrow, in exchange for a fatal grip. The octopus's goal is not to fight the lobster inside the cave. Its goal is to destroy the context of the armor. The hundreds of suction cups lock onto the lobster's carapace, and the octopus simply pulls. It drags the heavily armored street fighter out of the alleyway and into the open water. The moment the lobster clears the edge of the crevice, the fight is over. The leverage is gone. The walls that protected its flanks have vanished. The asymmetrical claws, so devastating in a head-on collision, cannot defend against an enemy that is attacking from all 360 degrees simultaneously. The octopus wraps the lobster in a suffocating embrace, pinning the heavy claws against the carapace. It finds the soft, flexible seams beneath the arms, the tiny gaps in the riot gear. The hardened beak slides into the joint, delivering a microdose of paralyzing venom directly into the lobster's nervous system. The street fighter goes limp, defeated not by strength, but by an absolute subversion of space. Large predatory fish, having learned the painful lessons of the crusher claw, have also developed tactics to bypass the frontal assault. A massive triggerfish will not enter the cave. Instead, it will use its powerful jaws to grab the lobster by a protruding antenna and violently yank it into the open. Once exposed, the fish does not try to bite through the thick upper shell. It attacks the lobster with rapid, concussive strikes, ramming it against coral, shaking it violently until the lobster flips upside down. The moment the soft underbelly is exposed, the fish tears into the joints, dismembering the heavily armored creature from the bottom up. These brutal, high-stakes encounters highlight the incredible economic burden of the lobster's weaponry. The claws of the lobsters only guarantee a survival, but maintaining them is metabolically exhausting. If a lobster loses a claw in a fight, whether to an octopus, a shark, or a rival, it is not a death sentence, but is a catastrophic demotion in the hierarchy of the reef. The lobster possesses the incredible ability to regenerate lost limbs, but the process takes several molting cycles. For months or even years, the lobster must survive with a diminutive, useless replacement claw. During this period of forced disarmament, the lobster's entire psychology changes. The aggressive, confident defender of the crevice becomes timid, paranoid, and intensely shelter-bound. It avoids confrontation at all costs. It knows that without its weapons, the biological contract of the alleyway is void. This demotion does not only affect its survival against predators, it completely destroys its standing within its own society. Lobsters are not solitary, peaceful neighbors. They are aggressively territorial landlords engaged in a constant, ruthless war over real estate. On a crowded reef, a deep, narrow, perfectly angled crevice is the most valuable currency in existence. It is a literal difference between life and death. When two lobsters cross paths, they engage in a complex, ritualized combat to determine who owns the best shelters. They stand face to face, lashing each other with their antennae, raising their bodies as high as possible to display the sheer size of their crusher claws. They lock claws, pushing and wrestling like heavily armored gladiators. The fight rarely ends in death, but it always ends in eviction. The lobster with the larger crusher claw, or the one that already holds a superior defensive position within a cave, inevitably wins. The victor claims a prime real estate, securing a fortified bunker that offers the highest probability of surviving the night. The loser is pushed into the margins. It is forced to settle for shallow overhangs, wide, exposed crevices, or sandy depressions where the walls offer no protection for its flanks. In lobster society, poverty is measured by the width of your front door. The subordinates are relegated to the slums of the reef, where the shadows are thin and the octopuses and the sharks are always hunting. This relentless pressure, from above, from the shadows, and from their own kind, drives an endless, slow-motion arms race. Predators evolve tougher skin to withstand the cutter and stronger jaws to crack the carapace. In response, lobsters evolve thicker armor, heavier crushers, and deeper, more paranoid behavior routines. But at the core of its existence, the lobster is a master of biological economics. It does not survive by being invulnerable. It survives by making the math work in its favor. It turns its own body into a highly disadvantageous calculation for anything considering a meal. When a predator peers into the dark crack of the limestone and sees the sweeping antennae and the raised, asymmetrical claws, it is forced to read the contract the lobster has written. The lobster is saying, asterisk, you might win. You might crack this shell, but you will bleed for it. You will lose an eye. You will lose a fin. You will expend more calories fighting me in this narrow hall than my flesh will ever repay. Asterisk. Most of the time, the predator calculates the risk, turns away, and searches the open water for softer, faster prey that doesn't fight back. The lobster lowers its claws, its back firmly pressed against the ancient stone, safe for another hour in the dark. It is not the fastest, and it is not the biggest, but in the brutal, claustrophobic alleyways of the ocean floor, the armored street fighter survives simply by being the absolute last thing anyone wants to fight. In the architecture of survival, movement is typically the ultimate failsafe. If your camouflage is broken, you run. If your hiding place is discovered, you flee. The vast majority of the ocean's inhabitants operate on the premise that distance is the only true defense against teeth. But when you look down at the hard, jagged landscape of the rocky reef, you'll find an organism that has completely abandoned the concept of distance. It does not run. It does not hide. It does not possess a single muscle designed for rapid acceleration. It has staked its entire evolutionary existence on a philosophy of absolute, unyielding, structural denial. To encounter a sea urchin is to encounter a biological barricade. It sits on the stone, a dark, bristling sphere of geometry that looks less like a living animal and more like a naval mine dropped onto the seafloor. It has no face. It has no front or back. It offers no eyes to convey intent and no posture to suggest aggression or fear. It merely exists, radiating hundreds of long, rigid spines in every conceivable direction. It is a creature that has solved the problem of predation by weaponizing its own perimeter, daring the ocean to find a safe angle of approach. There are no safe angles. The spines of the sea urchin are not merely sharp. They are a masterpiece of malicious engineering. They are constructed from a matrix of calcium carbonate crystals, layered in a way that makes them incredibly rigid but crucially brittle. This brittleness is not a design flaw. It is the core of the weapon. If a predator, a curious fish, or a hungry crab attempts to press past the perimeter and bite the urchin, the spines do not bend. They pierce the soft tissues of the attacker's mouth, lips, or gums. And the moment lateral pressure is applied, as the predator thrashes to pull away, the spine snaps off. It breaks cleanly, leaving a jagged, chalky splinter buried deep inside the predator's flesh. Because of the microscopic, porous structure of the spine, it is incredibly difficult for the attacker's body to expel. It festers. It causes intense, lingering pain, inflammation, and often infection. In some species of urchin, these spines are hollow and filled with a mild, irritating neurotoxin, turning the mechanical injury into a burning chemical wound. The urchin does not need to kill the fish. It only needs to permanently ruin the fish's day. This is a defense mechanism built on the economics of memory and consequence. A predator with a mouth full of shattered urchin spines cannot hunt effectively. It cannot close its jaws. It is severely compromised in an environment where weakness is an immediate death sentence. Therefore, the vast majority of predators in the ocean learn a very simple, very permanent lesson. The spiny sphere is not food. It is a hazard. The nutritional reward hidden inside the shell is not worth the catastrophic, lingering cost of the extraction. Because of this profound deterrent, the sea urchin commands a strange, almost tense respect on the reef. You can watch large, aggressive predators, sharks, groupers, jacks, swim directly over an exposed urchin, completely ignoring it. Smaller fish will hover nearby, eyeing the gaps between the spines, occasionally darting in to pick off a piece of drifting algae, but always treating the perimeter with the extreme caution of a bomb disposal unit. The urchin controls the space around it without ever lifting a finger. It exerts a gravitational push against the biology of everything nearby. But if you look closely beneath the terrifying forest of spines, you will discover that the sea urchin is not just a static object. It is a complex, slowly grinding machine. The spines themselves are mounted on tiny ball and socket joints attached to the central shell, known as the test. They are controlled by microscopic muscles, allowing the urchin to pivot them, angling a denser thicket of spears toward perceived threat, or leaning them to walk across the rock. Yet, the spines are not the primary method of locomotion. Hidden beneath the armor, extending down to touch the stone, are hundreds of delicate, translucent, fluid-filled tubes. These are the tube feet. Like the starfish, the sea urchin relies on a water vascular system. It pulls seawater into its body, pressurizing these tiny biological hoses. At the end of each tube foot is a microscopic suction cup. This hydraulic system anchors the urchin to the reef with terrifying strength. As the ocean surges, crashing waves over the rocks with the force of a wrecking ball, the urchin does not wash away. It is bolted to the earth by hundreds of individual, fluid-locked tethers. When it wants to move, it engages these tube feet in a slow, rhythmic sequence, gripping, pulling, and releasing, dragging its heavy, armored dome across the terrain at a pace that is almost geological. It moves for one reason, an endless, insatiable hunger. At the absolute bottom center of the urchin, pressed directly against the rock, lies its mouth, and it is one of the most mechanically complex and ruthlessly efficient feeding structures in the natural world. It is called Aristotle's lantern. It is a 5-jawed, highly calcified scraping apparatus powered by a complex network of muscles and ligaments. The 5 teeth meet at a central point, functioning like a biological excavator bucket. As the urchin moves over the stone, Aristotle's lantern extends, scrapes, and retracts. The teeth are self-sharpening, grinding against each other to maintain a chisel-like edge that can easily scrape tough, encrusting algae directly off solid rock. The jaws are so hard and the muscles so relentless that over time, a sea urchin can actually carve deep depressions into solid limestone simply by chewing on it. This relentless scraping is what makes the sea urchin one of the most ecologically consequential animals in the ocean. When the delicate balance of the ecosystem holds, sea urchins are kept in check. They hide in the crevices, venturing out to graze, effectively mowing the lawn of the reef, and preventing fast-growing algae from smothering the slow-growing coral polyps. In this state, they are vital gardeners. But when that balance breaks, when the predators that control them are removed by overfishing or disease or environmental shifts, the urchin population explodes. And an exploded population of sea urchins ceases to be a gardener. It becomes a plague. In the towering, sunlit kelp forests of the colder oceans, an unchecked army of sea urchins will mobilize. They will march out of crevices in the thousands, a slow-moving, spiny carpet of devastation. They do not just eat the fallen frond of the kelp. They target the holdfasts, the root-like structures anchoring the giant kelp to the seafloor. Aristotle's lantern chews methodically through the tough, rubbery anchors. Once the holdfast is severed, The entire kelp stalk, a towering pillar of life that supported hundreds of other species, washes away in the current. The urchins march forward, chewing through the next anchor and the next. They clear-cut the underwater forest with industrial efficiency. What is left behind is an ecological wasteland known as an urchin barren. The fish vanish. The crabs starve. The complex three-dimensional architecture of the forest is replaced by a flat, empty expanse of bare rock, completely paved over by millions of starving, desperate sea urchins. The terrifying reality of an urchin barren is that the urchins do not die when the food runs out. They have the astonishing ability to essentially put their own metabolism on pause. They can absorb dissolved nutrients directly from the seawater to sustain minimal life functions. They stop growing, their internal organs shrink, and they sit on the barren rock for years, sometimes decades, waiting in a state of suspended zombie-like animation. The forest cannot regrow, because the moment a tiny kelp spore attempts to sprout, the starving urchins immediately scrape it off the rock. They lock the ecosystem into a state of permanent ruin, simply by refusing to die. This immense destructive potential is why the evolutionary arms race centered around the sea urchin is so extreme. The ocean cannot afford to let them graze unchecked. And so, evolution produced a handful of highly specialized predators that simply refuse to respect a barricade. These are the rule breakers. They are the animals that looked at the impenetrable sphere of venomous glass needles and figured out the structural loopholes. A massive wolf eel, with its grotesque, heavy-set jaw, does not bother trying to pick around the spines. It relies on the sheer, crushing density of its own skull. It opens its mouth, bites directly down onto the entire urchin, and crushes the test into fragments in a single, brutal compression. It absorbs the spines into its thick, heavily calloused gums, swallowing the shattered armor and the soft meat indiscriminately. But perhaps the most elegant circumvention of the urchin's defense belongs to the triggerfish. The triggerfish does not possess the crushing power of the wolf eel, nor does it possess the tool-wielding genius of the sea otter. It relies on fluid dynamics and an intimate understanding of the urchin's anatomy. The triggerfish knows that the armor of the sea urchin is not uniform. The top and the sides are an impenetrable forest, but the bottom, the space immediately surrounding the mouth, where the 2 feet must connect with the stone, is relatively bare. The spines are short, sparse, and ineffective. The triggerfish approaches the urchin and hovers just above it. It angles its body downward and begins to forcefully spit rapid, concentrated jets of water at the base of the urchin. The hydraulic pressure blasts away the sand. It forces the water beneath the urchin's dome, creating an intense lifting force. The urchin strains, its hundreds of tube feet fighting desperately to hold onto the rock against the artificial current. But the triggerfish is relentless. It blasts jet after jet, undermining the urchin's hydraulic grip. Eventually, a section of tube feet fails. The current catches the edge of the test, and the urchin is violently flipped upside down. In that single moment, the entire logic of the animal's millions of years of evolution collapses. Lying upside down on the sand, the urchin is helpless. Its long defensive spines are pointing uselessly toward the seafloor. Its soft, exposed, minimally defended underbelly is pointed directly at the sky. The triggerfish darts in, its sharp, chisel-like teeth bypass the remaining short spines, and it bites directly into the soft tissue around the mouth. It hollows out the dome from the bottom up, leaving the empty shell behind like a discarded bowl. This all-or-nothing reality defines the existence of the sea urchin. Its armor is binary. It works flawlessly against 99% of the ocean, offering total immunity. But against the 1% that knows the trick, the armor offers absolutely zero mitigation. Once the test is cracked, once the geometry is inverted, the urchin has no backup plan. It cannot swim away. It cannot fight back. It simply dies inside its own ruined fortress. This intense predation pressure drives the urchin to invest massive amount of energy into its defenses. In environments where triggerfish, otters, or heavy-jawed wrasses patrol, sea urchins evolve incredibly thick tests. They grow longer, denser spines. They divert calories away from reproduction, away from growth, and pour entirely into the fortification of the barricade. They become heavier, slower, and even more entrenched. They wedge themselves so deeply into the limestone crevices that as they grow, they actually trap themselves. The urchin becomes larger than the opening of the cave it crawled into. It spends the rest of its life as a prisoner of its own hiding place, surviving solely on whatever pieces of drift algae happen to wash into its cell. It sacrifices its freedom for the ultimate guarantee that it can never be flipped over. When you look at the sea urchin, you are looking at the extreme logical conclusion of passive defense. It is an animal that has wagered everything on the assumption that the world will eventually get tired of trying to hurt it. It sits in the current, grinding its 5 teeth against a stone, holding on to hundreds of invisible hydraulic tethers. It does not possess a brain capable of fear or anticipation or strategy. It possesses only a localized nervous system that tells the spines to pivot when a shadow falls over them. It is a silent, bristling anchor of the reef floor. It has the power to level forests and the power to maintain them, and it achieves all of this without taking a single step in anger. In a kinetic ocean defined by the frantic, endless chase, the sea urchin survives by making a singular, absolute statement to the universe. I will not move, and you will bleed if you make me. Nature does not negotiate. It does not apologize. It only adapts and it survives. The stories we tell ourselves about the wild are often comforted by illusion, but the reality is a masterpiece of ruthless, mechanical perfection. If you are ready to strip away the myths and witness the unvarnished, brutal truth of our planet, then you belong here. Subscribe right now. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our next descent into the wild. The world is vast. Its rules are unforgiving, and our exploration has only just begun. Do not stop here. The ecosystem continues, and so do we. Click the video on your screen right now to step into the next untamed landscape. We will see you out there.